There's something about abandoned places that lures us in, a curiosity too strong to ignore, even when every instinct screams to turn away. Today, we take you deep into a forgotten corner of the world, a place where silence isn't just the absence of sound, but a presence of something far darker. This is the story of the abandoned asylum, where secrets have been buried beneath dust, locked behind doors no one dares open. Until now. Our protagonist, a young investigative journalist, has heard whispers of this place. The locals don't speak its name, yet stories travel through back channels like a forbidden secret. It's an asylum left to rot decades ago, a monument to horrors most people would prefer to forget. But that's what makes it the perfect subject for our curious reporter. Drawn by a need to uncover the truth, no matter how sinister, he finds himself standing at the edge of this eerie site, a crumbling relic of madness and misery. The asylum looms before him, its stone facade stained by time and weather, windows shattered and gaping like dead eyes. Vines twist through cracks in the walls, giving the building an appearance of something trying to crawl its way out from the inside. Everything about it is wrong, but that's exactly what pulls him closer. He'd heard about this place from a local guide, though the conversation was brief. The village surrounding the asylum seems to have moved on from its dark history, but no one can ever forget. You don't want to go there, the guide had warned. People go missing around those parts, and those who come back, they're never quite the same. It was an ominous statement, but it wasn't enough to deter him. A journalist doesn't turn away from the truth, no matter how chilling the warning. Approaching the entrance, the air shifts. The temperature drops, an unnatural cold that makes the hair on his arms rise. Yet he presses on. There's a heavy, rusted gate that groans as he pushes it open, its screech slicing through the stillness. With each step, the asylum grows larger, more imposing, as if it's swallowing him into its forgotten depths. He's no longer sure whether it was his choice to come here, or if something within the asylum is beckoning him in. He takes a breath, steadying himself. He's here for answers, and answers never come easy. Inside, the silence is suffocating, broken only by the soft creak of floorboards beneath his boots. The walls are lined with peeling paint, remnants of a time long past. Dust coats everything, a thick blanket of neglect that hides what once was. But there are things dust can't cover, like the feeling that something is watching him. Eyes from the shadows, lurking just out of sight. It isn't long before he notices the subtle signs. A broken wheelchair, overturned in the hallway. A set of files left scattered on the floor, their pages yellowed and brittle with age. Names, faces, people who were once confined here, their lives reduced to medical records and scribbled diagnoses. He scans the files, trying to make sense of it all, but it's fragmented, just like this place. As he moves deeper into the asylum, something changes. It's subtle at first, a flicker of movement out of the corner of his eye. He turns quickly, but there's nothing there, just the empty hallway stretching out ahead of him. He shakes his head, chalking it up to nerves, but the feeling won't leave him. There's something in the air, something that feels alive, breathing through the cracks in the walls. And then, he hears it, a whisper. At first it's faint, barely audible, like wind slipping through the broken windows. But it grows louder. A voice. No, multiple voices, speaking in low, urgent tones. He stops, heart pounding. "Who's there?" he calls out, the words echoing through the corridor. But no one answers. The voices stop. He's alone again, or so it seems. For a moment, he hesitates, considering turning back. But curiosity is a powerful force, one that pushes him forward despite the growing unease in his chest. He's come this far, and turning back now feels like admitting defeat. Whatever is in this asylum, it has a story to tell, and he intends to uncover it. He presses on, each step taking him further into the unknown. The walls close in, the darkness deepens, and the whispers begin again. This time they're closer. There's no turning back now. He ventures deeper into the asylum, the air growing colder, heavier with every step. The hallways seem endless, each one more dilapidated than the last. His flashlight flickers, casting long shadows on the walls. There's a smell now, Faint but unmistakable, mildew and something far worse. It's a scent that sticks in his throat, a sharp reminder that this place hasn't been touched in years. Yet, it feels alive, like it's waiting for him. As he rounds the corner, he stumbles upon something that makes his breath catch. A door slightly ajar, the first sign that someone, or something, may have been here before him. He steps closer, cautiously pushing it open with the tip of his boot. The door creaks, echoing down the hallway. Beyond it is a small office, once belonging to a doctor or administrator. Papers are strewn across the desk, as if someone left in a hurry. But what draws his attention is the large filing cabinet tucked into the corner. It's rusted, but it looks like it's still intact. He kneels down, pulling open the drawer with some effort. Inside, he finds folders, patient records, yellowed and brittle with age. His fingers trace over the names, many of them faded, but one stands out, bolder than the rest. He pulls the file out, wiping off the dust. The name is barely legible, but it sends a chill through him nonetheless. Isaac Hargrove, a patient admitted over 50 years ago, transferred under mysterious circumstances. Flipping through the pages, he learns that Hargrove wasn't just any patient. He was subjected to experimental treatments, procedures that would make even the most hardened doctors of today recoil. Electroshock therapy, isolation, sleep deprivation, the list goes on. But what strikes him is how abruptly the records end, as if Hargrove simply vanished. No discharge papers, no transfer notices, just a sudden stop. His heart races as he pieces it together. This asylum wasn't just a place for the mentally ill. It was a place where they were used. Suddenly, a loud bang breaks the silence, startling him. He spins around, his flashlight catching the edge of a door slamming shut at the end of the hallway. The echo lingers, but there's no one there. He's sure of it. His pulse quickens, but curiosity, mixed with a growing sense of dread, pushes him to investigate. As he approaches the door, he notices something scrawled on it, barely visible through the layers of grime. "We never left." The words send a shiver down his spine. With a trembling hand, he pushes the door open. The room beyond is different from the rest. It's colder, darker, as if the light itself refuses to enter. Inside, the walls are lined with old medical equipment, rusted gurneys, cracked vials, and charts documenting unspeakable treatments. He steps further in, the floorboards creaking under his weight. At the far end of the room is an operating table, still covered in a stained sheet. Whatever happened here was not meant to be remembered. He approaches the table slowly, his heart pounding in his ears. His fingers graze the sheet, and for a moment he hesitates. But something compels him to continue. With a quick motion, he pulls the sheet back. Nothing. The table is empty. Relief washes over him, but it's short-lived. The temperature in the room drops even further, and that's when he hears it again, the whispers. Louder this time, surrounding him from all sides. He shines his flashlight frantically around the room, but there's no one there. The whispers grow more intense, overlapping, voices blending together in a chaotic symphony of fear. And then, one voice stands out, a low, gravelly whisper. "Help me." He freezes, his breath caught in his throat. The voice is coming from behind him. Slowly, he turns, the beam of his flashlight shaking in his hands. There, in the corner of the room, a figure stands. It's barely visible, just a shadow in the darkness, but he can see it clearly enough. A man in a hospital gown, his eyes hollow, his skin pale. He opens his mouth to speak, but no words come out. For a moment, they just stare at each other, the silence thick between them. And then, the figure takes a step forward. Panic sets in. The journalist stumbles backward, knocking over a tray of instruments with a loud crash. The figure disappears as quickly as it appeared, fading into the shadows. But the whisper lingers, haunting the air. "Help me." Shaken, the journalist bolts out of the room, his heart hammering in his chest. He doesn't stop running until he's back in the hallway, gasping for breath. He tries to rationalize what he just saw. Was it a trick of the light? His mind playing games? But deep down, he knows it was real. There's something in this asylum, something that's been trapped here for decades, and it's trying to reach him. He glances down at the file still clutched in his hand. Isaac Hargrove. There's more to this place than abandoned hallways and broken memories. There are secrets buried here, and he's only just scratched the surface. Determined to uncover the truth, he steels himself for what lies ahead. The asylum may have tried to scare him off, but now he's more driven than ever. Whatever happened to Isaac Hargrove and the others, he's going to find out. But as he walks down the corridor, the whispers follow. They know he's here, and they're not done with him yet. The deeper he ventures into the asylum, the more the walls seem to close in on him. Each hallway feels narrower, each door more foreboding. His flashlight flickers, casting shadows that twist and writhe on the peeling wallpaper. The whispers haven't stopped. In fact, they've grown louder, more persistent, as if the very walls are speaking to him. The air is thick with something he can't quite place, a presence that wraps itself around him, watching, waiting. He reaches a corridor he hasn't seen before. It's different, untouched by the decay that blankets the rest of the asylum. The walls are still stark white, the floors polished. There's a sterile smell, like antiseptic, hanging in the air. It's too clean, too orderly, like time is frozen in this part of the building, as if whatever happened here hasn't faded with the years. At the end of the corridor, a door stands ajar, light spilling from within. He approaches cautiously, his footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The door creaks as he pushes it open, revealing a small room bathed in the cold glow of fluorescent lights. In the center is a table covered with medical equipment, scalpels, forceps, syringes, all meticulously arranged as if someone had been preparing for a procedure. But it's what's on the table that makes his blood run cold. A series of black and white photographs scattered across the metal surface. He picks one up, his hand shaking. The image shows a patient strapped to a chair, electrodes attached to their temples, their face contorted in agony. He flips through the others, each one more disturbing than the last. Patients subjected to horrific experiments, forced into isolation tanks, injected with unknown substances, their bodies twisted and broken. He stumbles backward, his stomach churning. These aren't just old records. These are snapshots of suffering, torture masquerading as treatment. His mind races. The whispers he's been hearing, they aren't just echoes of the past. They're the voices of those who were trapped here, those who were used as test subjects for unspeakable experiments. And somehow, their presence still lingers, woven into the very fabric of the asylum. He forces himself to keep going, to push past the fear clawing at his chest. There's more to uncover, more answers hidden in this labyrinth of nightmares. He moves toward a set of drawers along the far wall, his hands trembling as he pulls them open. Inside, he finds folders, dozens of them, labeled with patient numbers. One by one, he flips through them, each revealing another tragic story. Each patient subjected to the same experimental treatments, their fate sealed the moment they entered the asylum. Then he finds it, the file he didn't know he was looking for. Isaac Hargrove. He pulls the folder from the drawer, his heart pounding. The file is thicker than the others, filled with detailed notes and documents. Flipping through the pages, he reads about Hargrove's admission to the asylum, brought in for what was described as delusional behavior and violent outbursts. But the treatments he was subjected to were far beyond the norm. Electroshock therapy, chemical-induced comas, isolation in dark rooms for days on end. The doctors were relentless, determined to break him, to control his mind. But Isaac fought back. And then, something strange. A final entry in the file. A note written by the asylum's head physician, dated just days before the facility was shut down. The words are scrawled hastily, barely legible. Subject shows signs of enhanced cognitive abilities following the most recent procedure. Unexplained phenomena occurring during sessions. Recommend immediate containment and further study. Hargrove is no longer a patient. He is an anomaly. His breath catches in his throat. Isaac Hargrove wasn't just another patient. He was the key to something much darker, something far more dangerous than mere psychological treatment. The doctors here were experimenting with the mind in ways that went beyond science, tapping into forces they didn't understand. The air in the room grows colder, the whispers louder, more insistent. He can barely focus as he reads the final note. All staff are to avoid contact with Hargrove. He is no longer human. A chill runs down his spine. Isaac Hargrove didn't just disappear. He became something else. And whatever he became is still here, in this asylum, waiting in the shadows. The journalist's heart races as he puts the file back, every instinct screaming at him to leave. But before he can move, the lights flicker and die, plunging the room into darkness. The whispers swell around him, a cacophony of voices crying out in pain, begging for release. Then, silence. Complete, suffocating silence. For a moment, he stands frozen in place, his breath shallow, his hands shaking. And then he feels it, a presence behind him, cold and oppressive. Slowly, he turns, his flashlight flickering back to life, just in time to illuminate the figure standing at the edge of the room. It's Isaac, or what's left of him. The figure is gaunt, skeletal, its eyes sunken and hollow. It's draped in a tattered hospital gown, its skin a sickly gray. But it's the eyes that send a wave of terror crashing over him. Eyes that are no longer human, glowing with a faint, unnatural light. Isaac takes a step forward, and the whispers return, louder than ever. The journalist stumbles back, his flashlight shaking in his grip. Isaac's mouth moves, but no sound comes out. Yet the journalist can hear him, hear the words inside his mind. You shouldn't have come here. Before he can react, Isaac lunges. The force of Isaac's lunge sends the journalist sprawling to the floor, his flashlight clattering from his hand and plunging the room into near darkness. He scrambles backward, heart hammering in his chest, his fingers scraping across the cold, tiled floor. The whispers are deafening now, a torrent of voices that seem to pulse through the very walls, feeding off his fear. Isaac's figure looms above him, his hollow eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The journalist's mind races, grasping for a way out, any way to escape this nightmare. He fumbles in his pocket for his phone, his only remaining source of light. It flickers to life, the screen casting an eerie glow that barely illuminates the room. Isaac stands frozen for a moment, as if the light has startled him. But then, with a low, guttural sound, he starts moving again, his movements slow, deliberate, like a predator closing in on its prey. Panic grips the journalist. His breath comes in ragged gasps as he stumbles to his feet, backing toward the door. But the door slams shut with a violent force, as if the asylum itself is determined to keep him trapped. He's cornered, nowhere to run. Isaac's form flickers, momentarily dissolving into the darkness before reappearing closer, his hand outstretched. The whispers grow sharper, more distinct. They're not just random voices anymore. They're commands, urging him to give in, to stop fighting, to let the asylum consume him like it has consumed so many before. But he won't. He can't. He bolts toward the nearest window, the glass fogged with decades of grime. With a surge of adrenaline, he smashes his phone against the pane, the glass cracking but not breaking. Behind him, Isaac lets out a spine-chilling hiss, and the temperature in the room plummets. The air is so cold it feels like ice, freezing his breath as he strikes the window again and again. Desperation fuels him. He has to get out. The glass finally shatters, sending shards flying in all directions. He doesn't hesitate, hurling himself through the opening, feeling the jagged edges scrape against his arms as he falls. He hits the ground hard, the wind knocked out of him. But he's alive. Pain shoots through his side, but the fear driving him is stronger than the agony. He looks up, expecting to see Isaac looming above him, reaching through the shattered window. But the window is dark, nothing but shadows inside. The asylum is silent, as if it's holding its breath, waiting. Slowly, he backs away, his eyes fixed on the broken window, half expecting the figure to re-emerge. But Isaac doesn't appear. For the first time since entering the asylum, there's no movement, no sound. The whispers have stopped. The air outside is cold, but it feels like freedom compared to the suffocating grip of the asylum's interior. His heart races, but with each step he takes away from the building, a sense of relief starts to wash over him. He takes a moment to catch his breath, looking around at the overgrown courtyard. The moon hangs high in the sky, casting long shadows over the dilapidated structure. The asylum stands silent, its dark windows staring back at him like empty eyes. He's made it out, but the fear still clings to him, wrapping itself around his mind. The memories of Isaac Hargrove, of the experiments, of the patients whose cries still echo in the halls, they're not so easily left behind. Just as he begins to walk away, thinking it's over, a low rumble vibrates through the ground beneath his feet. He freezes, turning to face the asylum once more. The building stands still, but there's a change in the air, a tension like the moment before a storm. The journalist's eyes widen as he realizes the truth. Isaac isn't bound to the asylum. He's not trapped inside those walls. The ground beneath him trembles again, and this time, he can hear it, a faint whisper drifting on the wind, growing louder with each passing second. You shouldn't have come here. His heart pounds in his chest, the fear spiking once more. He knows now that whatever force was unleashed inside that asylum, whatever darkness was created in those horrific experiments, it's not confined to the building. It's followed him. Without thinking, he turns and runs, his feet pounding against the earth, the whispers chasing him through the night. The town, the world, everything beyond the asylum is no longer safe. The horror that lurked in the shadows of that abandoned institution is free. The journalist's only hope now is to outrun it. But deep down, he knows he's already too late. The darkness has followed him. The journalist's legs burn as he sprints through the darkened streets, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The asylum looms behind him, its shadow stretching unnaturally across the town, like the grasping fingers of a long-dead giant. The whispers still echo in his mind, growing louder with every step. They don't come from the asylum anymore. They come from everywhere. He glances over his shoulder, half expecting to see Isaac Hargrove emerging from the darkness, his hollow eyes glowing with that eerie light. But there's no figure chasing him. There doesn't need to be. The fear, the sense of impending doom, follows him like a living thing, wrapping itself around his thoughts, sinking into his bones. He knows he can't run forever. Suddenly, the streetlights flicker above him, casting long, flickering shadows. He stops in his tracks, gasping for air, his eyes scanning the deserted road. Everything is unnervingly quiet, too quiet for a town this size. It's as if the entire place has been swallowed by the same darkness that engulfed the asylum. Then he hears it, a faint whisper, barely audible at first, but growing steadily louder. It's not just in his mind anymore. The whispers are out here, with him, in the streets, and they're not alone. From the shadows, faint figures begin to emerge. Their shapes are blurry, indistinct, like ghosts in a dense fog. But there's something unmistakable about them. They are the patients, the tortured souls of the asylum, the ones who never left, the ones who were consumed by the darkness long before the asylum was abandoned. The journalist stumbles back, his heart racing. He's surrounded. Everywhere he turns, more figures appear, some gaunt and skeletal like Isaac, others twisted and broken, their faces contorted in agony. They move slowly, deliberately, as if they've been waiting for this moment for decades. His back hits the wall of a nearby building, and he realizes there's nowhere left to run. The figures close in, their whispers swirling around him like a suffocating fog. His mind reels as he tries to make sense of it all, but there's no logic in what's happening. The asylum, the experiments, Isaac, it's all connected to something far darker, something that can't be explained by reason or science. And then, in the midst of the chaos, he hears a voice. Clear, distinct, and unmistakably human. You need to stop running. The voice isn't a whisper. It's not filled with malice or torment like the others. It's calm, steady, and it comes from within him. He doesn't understand how or why, but the voice offers a strange sense of clarity. His mind still swirls with fear, but something about those words makes him pause. Stop running. He doesn't know why, but he listens. Slowly, he lowers his arms, no longer shielding himself from the advancing figures. The whispers continue, but they seem less overwhelming now, less chaotic. The figures don't stop moving, but they don't attack either. They simply surround him, watching, waiting. He stands there, his breath still coming in shallow bursts, but his fear slowly beginning to ebb. There's a realization forming in the back of his mind, something that's been trying to break through since he first stepped foot in the asylum. The patients, the experiments, Isaac, they aren't after him. They never were. They're after something else. Suddenly, the whispers grow louder, almost frantic, as if they're trying to communicate something urgent. He closes his eyes, focusing on the sound, trying to make sense of the words. And then, in a flash of clarity, he understands. The darkness that consumed the asylum wasn't Isaac Hargrove. It wasn't the patients. It was the asylum itself. The building, the very walls had absorbed the pain, the suffering, the fear. And now, that darkness has spread beyond its physical boundaries, into the town, into the world. The journalist opens his eyes, the figures still standing around him, watching with their hollow eyes. He knows what he has to do. "I'm not afraid of you," he says aloud, his voice shaking slightly, but growing steadier with each word. "You're not real. You're just echoes." The figures don't respond, but the air around him seems to shift. The tension lessens, the whispers fade slightly. It's as if the darkness is losing its grip on him, weakening in the face of his defiance. He steps forward, walking toward the nearest figure, a gaunt, broken man with a hospital gown hanging off his skeletal frame. The figure doesn't move. The journalist reaches out, his hand passing right through the figure's form, as if it were made of mist. They're not real. None of it is. He takes another step, then another, walking right through the circle of figures, their forms dissolving into the air as he moves. The whispers fade, replaced by the quiet hum of the town around him. The lights above him flicker one last time, and then everything is still. The asylum is still there, looming in the distance, but it no longer holds the same power over him. He knows the darkness is still inside, waiting, but for now, it's contained. And as long as people stay away, it will remain that way. But as he turns to leave, a final whisper drifts on the wind. This isn't over. The journalist pauses, his heart skipping a beat. He glances back at the asylum one last time before shaking his head. Whatever force was unleashed in that place, it's not done yet. But that's a story for another day. For now, he survived. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more terrifying tales, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. There are plenty more stories waiting to be uncovered, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and remember, some places are better left forgotten. In a small, forgotten village, tucked away behind an overgrown forest, lies a graveyard no one dares to mention. The locals speak of it only in whispers, and many insist that no one has ventured there in decades. Our protagonist, a curious historian, can't resist the pull of a mystery long buried. He's heard rumors of the forgotten graveyard, an ancient resting place that disappeared from maps, forgotten by time. But more intriguing than its erasure from records are the hushed warnings from the locals. Once you enter, you don't leave the same. Driven by the promise of uncovering ancient secrets, our protagonist sets out on a misty morning, determined to piece together the puzzle of this cursed place. As he follows the narrow path through the dense forest, he can't help but feel the growing weight of silence surrounding him. Birds, once chirping in the trees, seem to vanish the closer he gets. Even the rustle of leaves feels distant, as though the air itself has been stripped of sound. When he finally breaks through the tangled branches, the graveyard appears before him, forgotten but far from peaceful. The ground is uneven, overgrown with thick vines that seem to choke the very life out of the tombstones. And the tombstones, cracked and weathered, their inscriptions barely visible, stand like crooked sentinels in the mist. But something about the place feels wrong, deeply wrong, as if the land itself is rejecting his presence. Approaching one of the tombstones, the historian reaches out, brushing the dirt away from an old inscription. The name has long been eroded by time, but beneath the grime, he spots strange symbols carved into the stone. They're unlike anything he's seen before. Ancient runes, perhaps? His pulse quickens as he realizes he may have stumbled upon something far older, far more dangerous than a mere burial ground. Near the center of the graveyard stands a large, imposing mausoleum. The structure is oddly pristine compared to the decaying headstones, its stonework untouched by the elements. Intrigued, he moves closer, noting the strange symbols etched into its heavy iron door. The words are in an ancient language, But one phrase stands out clearly: the curse of the forgotten graveyard. Something inside stirs, a gut feeling warning him to turn back. But the draw of the unknown is stronger. He pushes the thought aside, convinced the stories he's heard are mere folklore. As he stands there, studying the mausoleum, a gust of wind whips through the graveyard, cold and biting. The sky darkens, and for a moment, the historian feels the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Glancing over his shoulder, he sees nothing but rows of broken gravestones and the thickening fog creeping closer. Yet, the unease won't leave him. Something, or someone lurks in this place. He can feel it, the prickling of his skin telling him that he's not alone. But he isn't deterred. This is what he came for: mystery, discovery, and the thrill of unraveling a hidden past. What could be more exciting than proving the villagers wrong? That the tales of a cursed graveyard are nothing more than superstition. With a final glance at the mausoleum, he retreats back to the edge of the graveyard, resolving to return after gathering more information. He doesn't notice the faint shadow that moves silently among the graves, following his every step. The curse has awakened, and from this moment on, his fate is sealed. Back in the safety of the village, our historian can't shake the sense of dread that lingered in the air at the forgotten graveyard. He tries to rationalize it, chalk it up to the eerie atmosphere and the weight of local superstition. But deep down, he knows something more is at play. The graveyard wasn't just abandoned, it was forsaken. As night falls, the village feels no different from the graveyard. The streets are empty, the windows tightly shut, and even the tavern is silent. It's as though the whole village holds its breath, waiting for something to happen. The next day, our protagonist heads to the local archives, determined to dig deeper into the village's past. There, buried beneath decades of dust, he uncovers an old journal written by a man named William Fletcher, a villager from centuries ago. Fletcher's entries are erratic, filled with frantic scribbles and warnings of a curse that swept through the village, tied to the very ground the historian had stepped on the day before. Fletcher's writings tell of a time when the forgotten graveyard wasn't forgotten at all. It was once the heart of the village, a place where families laid their loved ones to rest with reverence and care. But something changed. Fletcher wrote of strange happenings. Bodies exhumed without reason, figures seen wandering the graveyard at night, and a deep, unshakable feeling that the dead were not resting peacefully. The villagers grew fearful. They began avoiding the graveyard altogether, until one night, it was sealed off entirely. A group of elders performed a ceremony. Fletcher was never sure what they did, only that they spoke of a curse they had to contain, one that couldn't be allowed to spread beyond the graveyard's borders. "We are cursed," Fletcher wrote in his final entry, "and the curse will never die as long as the graveyard stands." The historian can feel his pulse quicken as he reads. The pieces are beginning to fit together. This graveyard wasn't just neglected, it was intentionally hidden, erased from history. But why? And what exactly is this curse Fletcher spoke of? Determined to learn more, the historian seeks out the oldest living villager, an elderly woman named Agnes, who still remembers whispers of the curse from her childhood. She lives in a small, crumbling house at the edge of the village, far from the graveyard. Agnes is hesitant to speak at first, her eyes darting nervously to the door, as if she fears someone, or something, might overhear. But eventually, she relents, her voice barely above a whisper. Agnes tells him of the day the graveyard was closed. The village elders sealed it with a ritual meant to bind the restless spirits to their graves. But it was only a temporary fix. The spirits, angry and vengeful, were not meant to be contained. "They're still there," she says, her voice trembling, waiting for someone to disturb their rest. The historian listens, intrigued and horrified. "So what happens if someone does disturb them?" he asks. Agnes meets his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and sorrow. "They'll come for whoever wakes them. The curse will follow you. It always does." As she speaks, a cold chill settles over the room. The historian feels the hairs on his arms stand on end. He's already disturbed them by entering the graveyard, by uncovering its secrets. The curse, if it's real, is already in motion. But still, He feels an inexplicable pull to return to the graveyard, to uncover the full truth. Maybe it's the thrill of discovery, or perhaps a growing sense of responsibility to understand what he's unleashed. As he prepares to leave Agnes's house, she grabs his arm, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so frail. "Whatever you do, don't go back," she warns, her voice urgent. "You don't know what you're dealing with. Some things should stay buried." But it's too late. The historian is already in too deep. He nods politely, but the decision has been made. He has to go back to the forgotten graveyard. This time, he'll be ready to face whatever lurks there. With that, he leaves the house, the weight of the curse heavy on his mind. The sun begins to set, casting long, eerie shadows over the village as he walks. In the distance, the forest looms, and beyond it, the graveyard waits, silent, patient, and far from forgotten. As the historian approaches the forgotten graveyard once again, the sense of unease from his first visit has intensified. The forest seems even darker this time, the trees leaning in as if conspiring to keep him from entering. But the pull is too strong, and he pushes forward, driven by the need to uncover the truth behind the curse. Reaching the graveyard's entrance, the air grows thick with a sense of anticipation. The mausoleum in the center stands taller than before, almost as though it has risen from the ground, eager to reveal its secrets. His eyes dart to the shadows, where the graves seem to shift and move in the fog, but he brushes off the feeling, chalking it up to nerves. He steps carefully, this time more cautious than before. His first stop is the mausoleum, the strange symbols on its door calling to him. He knows there's something inside, something that might explain what happened centuries ago. But when he pushes on the heavy iron door, it doesn't budge. Frustrated, he turns his attention to the rest of the graveyard, convinced the answer lies somewhere among the graves. As he moves through the rows of crooked headstones, he begins to notice something strange. Some of the symbols on the gravestones match the ones on the mausoleum door. They seem to form a pattern, as if they're trying to lead him to something. But to what? Then he spots it, a single grave near the edge of the graveyard, hidden behind overgrown vines and trees. The headstone is older than the others, its surface covered in the same ancient runes. The historian kneels down and begins to clear away the dirt and moss, revealing more of the inscription. It's a name he recognizes from the journal: William Fletcher. Fletcher wasn't just a chronicler of the events that took place centuries ago. He was directly involved. The historian's heart races as he realizes that Fletcher may have been one of the elders who attempted to seal the curse, the one who warned of its power. But there's more. Beneath the name, the inscription continues, etched in smaller, more frantic writing. The curse is not contained. It will never be contained. A chill runs down his spine. Fletcher knew the ritual had failed. The spirits were never truly bound to their graves. They've been waiting, watching, ever since. And now, with the historian's intrusion, they've been disturbed. Suddenly, a gust of cold wind blows through the graveyard, sending shivers down his spine. The ground beneath him trembles, and for the first time, he hears it whispers. Faint at first, but growing louder with each passing second. The voices seem to rise from the very earth, swirling around him like a cold, suffocating fog. Panicked, the historian stumbles back, his mind racing. The spirits are awakening, just as Fletcher had warned. But what do they want? Is there still time to stop them? His eyes dart back to the mausoleum. The answer must lie inside. But without a way to open it, he's trapped. Desperate, he begins searching through Fletcher's journal again, hoping to find something, anything, that will help him unlock the mausoleum and discover the final piece of the puzzle. Flipping through the pages, his hands trembling, he finds it. A passage written in hurried, almost illegible script. The key to the mausoleum is hidden within the graves of the forsaken. He looks around, realizing that the graves surrounding him hold more than just bodies. They hold the key to unlocking the curse. As he moves toward the nearest grave, the whispers grow louder. The air turns frigid, and he feels a presence behind him. Turning, he sees them. Faint, ghostly figures emerging from the fog. They are the cursed souls, the ones Fletcher and the villagers tried to bind centuries ago. Their faces are pale, their eyes hollow, and they're slowly closing in on him. His heart pounds in his chest as he begins to dig through the earth, his hands moving frantically. The spirits draw closer, their whispers now almost deafening. He can feel their cold breath on his neck, their fingers reaching for him. But just as one of them brushes his shoulder, he finds it, the key. Clutching it in his trembling hands, he scrambles to his feet and rushes toward the mausoleum. The spirits follow, their ghostly forms gliding over the ground, their whispers now angry, desperate. He reaches the door, fumbling with the key as the spirits close in. With a shaky breath, he inserts the key into the lock. For a moment, nothing happens. Then, with a loud creak, the door swings open, revealing a dark, stone chamber inside. Without hesitation, the historian steps inside, slamming the door shut behind him. The whispers outside grow louder, pounding against the door, but for now, he's safe. The mausoleum holds the answers he's been searching for, but what he finds inside may be far worse than anything he imagined. Inside the mausoleum, the air is thick with the scent of old stone and something faintly metallic. The historian takes a deep breath, his flashlight casting long shadows on the walls of the chamber. The interior is unlike what he expected. A single large room with a high ceiling, adorned with intricate carvings and old symbols that glow faintly in the dim light. He steps cautiously, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The chamber is filled with ancient artifacts, dusty scrolls, and what appear to be ceremonial tools. In the center of the room stands an altar, covered in cryptic symbols and worn from age. Atop it lies an old, leather-bound book, its cover embossed with the same runes that mark the mausoleum's door. The historian approaches the altar, his heart pounding with anticipation. He carefully opens the book, its pages brittle and yellowed. Inside, he finds detailed records of rituals and incantations, written in a language he barely understands. But one section stands out, a description of the curse that haunts the graveyard. It speaks of a dark entity bound to the graveyard, one that feeds on fear and despair. As he reads, the room grows colder. The historian glances around, noticing that the faint glow from the symbols is now pulsating, as if alive. Shadows dance on the walls, and the whispers from outside grow louder, more insistent. The spirits are not just trying to enter. They're trying to break the barrier between the mausoleum and the graveyard. He reads further, discovering a ritual that may be the key to stopping the curse. An elaborate ceremony involving ancient symbols, specific incantations, and a sacrifice. The ritual must be performed at the heart of the graveyard, with the mausoleum as the central point. It's a dangerous undertaking, and failure would mean the curse remains stronger than ever. The historian realizes the enormity of what he must do. To stop the curse, he needs to perform the ritual precisely as described, using the artifacts and tools within the mausoleum. But he's not alone. The spirits are growing restless, their whispers becoming frantic as they sense his intention to disrupt their release. The room begins to shake, and the historian struggles to keep his balance. The walls seem to close in, and the shadows become more menacing. Desperate to complete the ritual, he gathers the ceremonial tools and begins setting up the altar, following the instructions as best as he can. The incantations are spoken aloud, their ancient words feeling foreign and powerful on his tongue. As he performs the final steps, the mausoleum's door begins to rattle, the spirits outside becoming increasingly agitated. The historian's hands shake as he finishes the last of the symbols, his voice growing hoarse as he completes the incantations. He feels an overwhelming force pushing against the barrier, as though the spirits are trying to reach him, to stop him from finishing what he started. The air becomes electric, charged with a dark energy that seems to seep from the walls. The historian can feel the presence of the spirits growing stronger, their anger palpable. The mausoleum's stone walls are covered in cracks, and the room is filled with a low, guttural growl that seems to come from the very depths of the earth. Just as he begins to doubt the success of the ritual, a blinding light erupts from the altar, pushing the shadows and whispers away. The historian shields his eyes, feeling the pressure of the curse lifting. The spirits outside scream in frustration, their voices melding into a cacophony of rage. The light grows brighter, enveloping the mausoleum and pushing back the darkness. As the light fades, the room falls silent. The historian, exhausted and disheveled, looks around. The carvings on the walls are now glowing with a soft, calming light, and the whispers have vanished. The curse has been contained, at least for now. The spirits have been driven back, their power subdued. But the historian knows that this is only a temporary reprieve. The curse may be contained, but it will never be fully eradicated. The mausoleum, now a repository of dark secrets, stands as a reminder of the ancient evil that lurks beneath. With a heavy heart, he exits the mausoleum, the weight of the curse still lingering. The graveyard, once ominous and silent, now feels almost serene, as if the darkness has been held at bay. But the historian knows that the curse will remain, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to disturb its rest. The sun rises over the village, casting a gentle light on the forgotten graveyard, now eerily calm. The historian steps out of the mausoleum, his face drawn and weary. The night's ordeal has left him physically and mentally exhausted, but he feels a profound sense of accomplishment. The curse, for now, has been contained. He takes a final look at the graveyard, its atmosphere markedly different from when he first arrived. The oppressive feeling has lifted, replaced by a fragile peace. The air is still, and the fog has lifted, revealing the graveyard in a new, almost serene light. Yet, the historian knows that this calm is deceptive. The darkness of the curse remains, lurking just beneath the surface. As he walks back to the village, the weight of what he has done settles heavily on his shoulders. The villagers, unaware of the full extent of his actions, greet him with cautious curiosity. They see the exhaustion in his eyes and the determination in his step, but they don't know the full story. The historian decides to keep the details of the curse and the ritual to himself, recognizing that some secrets are too dangerous to share. Returning to his lodgings, he reflects on the events of the past few days. The curse has been pushed back, but the price of meddling with such dark forces is high. He realizes that the knowledge he uncovered, while important, comes with responsibilities. The secrets of the forgotten graveyard are now part of his life, and he must ensure they remain hidden from those who might unwittingly unleash them once more. As he prepares to leave the village, the historian decides to share his experience in a different way. He wants to ensure that the story of the forgotten graveyard serves as a warning, not just a tale of adventure. He plans to create a video recounting his journey, detailing the history, the curse, and the eerie events he encountered. In this video, he'll recount the harrowing journey with vivid descriptions and a gripping narrative, capturing the attention of viewers and engaging them with the mystery and suspense of the curse. He'll explain the importance of respecting such dark and ancient places, sharing the lessons he learned from his encounter with the curse. As he wraps up his video, he'll make a heartfelt request to his viewers. He'll ask them to subscribe to his channel to follow his ongoing explorations into the unknown, to like the video if they found it intriguing, and to share their thoughts and questions in the comments. His aim is to build a community of curious minds, all intrigued by the mysteries that lie hidden in the shadows of our world. Thank you for joining me on this dark journey into the forgotten graveyard, he'll say. If you enjoyed the exploration and want to dive into more mysteries like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Your support means the world and helps us continue uncovering the secrets that lurk in the dark. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe. With these final words, the historian concludes his video, his expression a mix of relief and resolve. The curse may have been contained, but the allure of uncovering hidden truths and the responsibility of sharing them with the world remains. The historian's journey is far from over. There are more mysteries to explore, more secrets to uncover, and more stories to tell. Late into the night, the wind howled through the trees as if carrying the echoes of forgotten souls. Deep within the forest, hidden from the world, stood a cabin, ancient, worn, and steeped in mystery. This wasn't just any cabin. It was a place whispered about in the nearby village, a place no one dared to visit after dark. Our story begins with an outsider, A man tired of the routine, seeking solace in nature, but instead, finding something far more sinister. He was a photographer, a seeker of beauty in the natural world. His lens had captured the tranquil landscapes of lakes, mountains, and forests, but this trip was different. He wanted something more, something that would make people feel. Little did he know, the place he had chosen would deliver more than any photograph could capture. The cabin appeared on no map, spoken of only in hushed tones by the few who dared to mention it. It stood as a monument to the unknown, abandoned for decades, but never quite forgotten. The village nearby had its tales, of wanderers who strayed too close and never returned, of eerie lights flickering in the windows when the moon was full. It was the kind of story that clung to you, even if you didn't believe it. And for a man like him, curiosity was stronger than fear. As the photographer drove down the winding road leading deeper into the woods, the trees thickened, casting long shadows in the dim light of dusk. The air seemed heavier, almost tangible, as though it carried the weight of the stories surrounding the cabin. His pulse quickened, a mix of excitement and unease creeping into his mind. The thrill of capturing something no one else had dared to photograph propelled him forward. The first glimpse of the cabin was jarring. Its wooden structure, once sturdy, was now a crumbling relic of the past. Vines crawled up the sides, and the roof sagged under the weight of time. But it wasn't the state of disrepair that sent a shiver down his spine. It was the feeling that the place was waiting, as though it had been expecting him. He parked his car a few yards away, grabbed his camera bag, and approached cautiously. The evening was settling in, and soon, darkness would swallow the forest whole. He wanted to get a few shots of the cabin before the light disappeared, hoping to capture its eerie beauty in the twilight. But as he raised his camera to his eye, something made him hesitate. From the corner of his vision, he saw movement, a fleeting shadow in the window. He lowered the camera and stared. Nothing, just the decaying remains of an old house, empty and abandoned. He shook his head and smiled to himself. Just a trick of the light, he thought. But the unease gnawing at the back of his mind refused to let go. He snapped a few shots and circled the cabin, feeling the weight of the silence pressing in. The woods, which had been alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves just moments before, now seemed unnervingly still. It was as if the very air had been sucked out of the clearing, leaving only the cabin and the growing darkness. As he set up his tent a short distance away, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every so often, his eyes would dart back to the cabin, half expecting to see someone, or something, standing in the doorway. But it remained as lifeless as ever. He told himself it was the isolation getting to him, the silence playing tricks on his mind. Night fell quickly, and with it came the whispers. At first, he thought it was the wind, a low, eerie sound that seemed to come from all directions at once. But the longer he listened, the clearer it became. These were not random gusts of air through the trees. They were voices, faint, almost imperceptible, but there. His heart raced. He turned on his flashlight and scanned the perimeter, but there was nothing. Just the cabin, standing ominously under the moonlight, and the dense forest beyond. The voices seemed to fade as quickly as they had come, leaving him with nothing but the sound of his own breathing and the pounding of his heart. Determined to capture whatever was happening, he grabbed his camera and pointed it toward the cabin. He snapped a few shots, his hands trembling slightly, unsure of what he would see when he reviewed them later. But even as the shutter clicked, he knew this was only the beginning. The whispers would return. They always did. The next morning brought no sense of relief. The forest was eerily quiet, as though it, too, had been disturbed by the events of the previous night. As the photographer sat up in his tent, the memory of the whispers still lingered, nagging at him. It felt unreal, like a dream, yet his body was tense, as if it had been through a real, tangible threat. He quickly pulled his camera from his bag to review the shots from the night before, hoping to find some rational explanation for what had happened. But as he scrolled through the images, his breath caught in his throat. The photos were wrong. Not wrong in the sense of a camera malfunction, but wrong in a way that defied explanation. One by one, the images of the cabin revealed something he hadn't seen when he took them. In the window, barely visible in the dim light, were figures. Dark silhouettes, human in shape but blurred, as though caught mid-movement. He hadn't seen them when he was there, hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. But here they were, captured by his lens. The figures appeared in several frames, always near the window, always in the background, watching. He quickly flipped back through the rest of the images, his heart pounding harder with each one. The shadows in the pictures seemed to move, shift from one spot to another. In one, the figures were inside the cabin. In another, they seemed to be standing just outside the door. The last photo, taken just before he had retreated to his tent, showed one of the figures much closer, almost at the edge of the frame. And it wasn't alone. Panic gripped him. He had spent the entire night only a few yards from the cabin, completely unaware of what might have been watching him the whole time. He shivered as the thought crossed his mind. Was it all real? Were these just tricks of light and shadow? He needed answers, and fast. Packing his gear hastily, he drove into the nearby village, desperate to speak with someone who might know more about the legend surrounding the cabin. His mind raced as he navigated the winding roads, replaying the whispers and the images over and over again. The villagers had to know something. Maybe they could shed light on what he had experienced. When he arrived, he headed straight for the only place that seemed promising, a small cafe where a few locals gathered in the mornings. He asked around about the cabin, and at first, no one wanted to speak. Their eyes grew wide, and their expressions hardened at the mention of it. Most just shook their heads and walked away. But there was one person who remained, an old woman sitting in the corner, sipping tea, her eyes filled with a knowing sadness. "You went there, didn't you?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. "To the cabin." He nodded, unsure of how to respond. There was something about her presence that unnerved him, but also comforted him in a strange way. She gestured for him to sit, and as he did, she began to speak, her voice low and measured, as though sharing a terrible secret. "The cabin," she said, "is not what it seems. It has a history, a dark one. They say it was built by a family long ago, but none of them lived to see it completed. Every one of them died mysteriously during its construction. Ever since, anyone who stayed there after dark has disappeared or come back changed." The photographer felt a chill run down his spine. "Changed how?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "They're not the same," the old woman continued. "Some come back silent, never speaking of what they saw. Others come back, broken, like they've seen things no human mind should ever see. And then there are those who never return at all." She paused, her eyes locking onto his. "But it's the whispers that you should be most afraid of." His heart skipped a beat. "Whispers? They say the cabin is cursed, and the souls trapped inside it try to speak to anyone who comes near. They whisper in the wind, in the dark, trying to pull you closer, trying to drag you into their world. Once you hear them, it's already too late." The photographer sat in stunned silence, the weight of her words sinking in. The images on his camera, the strange feeling of being watched, the whispers in the night, it all made sense now. But he wasn't ready to give up. He had come too far to turn back now. "What happens if I go back?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The old woman leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "You won't make it out again." Despite the fear gnawing at his insides, the photographer felt an overwhelming need to return, to capture the truth, to prove that the legend was real, that the whispers weren't just in his mind. He thanked the old woman and stood up to leave, but her final words stopped him cold. "Midnight," she said, her voice trailing after him. "That's when they come." The sun was already beginning to set as the photographer made his way back to the cabin. His mind swirled with the old woman's words, the warnings, and the strange images captured on his camera. He knew returning was a dangerous gamble, but the need to uncover the truth outweighed the fear bubbling inside him. This time, he wasn't just looking for pictures. He was searching for answers. As the trees thickened around him and the road grew narrower, the forest once again seemed to close in. The wind picked up, rattling the branches, and the air grew cold. It was as if the very forest was warning him to turn back. But he pressed on, his car bumping along the rough dirt path until the cabin came into view. Just as before, it stood silently in the clearing, as though waiting for him. The photographer parked his car in the same spot and took a deep breath before stepping out. The evening was unnaturally quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves, just the heavy, oppressive silence that surrounded the cabin like a veil. He set up his equipment again, checking his cameras and placing them strategically around the perimeter, making sure they were all pointed at the cabin from different angles. He wanted to capture everything this time. If something was out there, if those whispers returned, he would have it on film. The sky darkened quickly, and the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the clearing. He checked his watch. It was almost midnight. The air was thick with anticipation, every second that ticked by feeling heavier than the last. As he stared at the cabin, its windows dark and lifeless, he felt the familiar sense of unease wash over him. But this time it was stronger. This time it was different. Then, just as the clock struck 12, the whispers began. They were faint at first, like a distant murmur carried on the wind. But soon, they grew louder, swirling around him, surrounding him from all directions. His breath caught in his throat. The sound was unmistakable now, voices speaking in hushed, urgent tones, as though trying to communicate something, trying to call him closer. He grabbed his camera and started filming, his heart pounding in his chest. As the whispers grew more intense, he felt the temperature drop, the air growing colder with each passing second. A shiver ran down his spine. The whispers weren't just sounds, they were voices, and they were getting closer. His eyes darted toward the cabin, and that's when he saw it. In the window, just as before, was the shadowy figure. But this time it wasn't alone. There were others, more figures, their shapes barely discernible, but undeniably there. They stood motionless, watching him, as though waiting for him to come closer. His pulse quickened, fear clawing at him, but he couldn't tear his gaze away. Then, slowly, the door of the cabin creaked open. He froze, his hand gripping the camera tightly. The whispers grew louder, almost frantic now, urging him forward. Every instinct screamed at him to turn and run, but his legs felt like they were rooted to the ground. His curiosity battled against his fear, and before he realized what he was doing, he found himself walking toward the cabin. Step by step, he moved closer, the whispers wrapping around him like a fog. As he reached the threshold of the door, he paused, staring into the dark interior of the cabin. It was pitch black inside, the air heavy and thick, but something about it seemed to pull him in. It was as though the cabin itself was alive, breathing, waiting for him to step inside. He lifted his camera and pointed it toward the open door, his hands trembling. He wanted to document everything, every shadow, every movement, every whisper. But as he pressed record, something unexpected happened. The camera froze. The screen went black. No matter what he did, it wouldn't turn back on. A wave of panic surged through him. He pulled out his phone and tried to use the flashlight, but it too wouldn't work. It was as if all his electronics had been drained of power the moment he approached the cabin. He looked around, suddenly feeling very alone, the darkness pressing in from all sides. And then he felt it, a presence. It was subtle at first, just a faint sensation of being watched. But soon it grew stronger, more intense. He could feel eyes on him, cold and unblinking, watching his every move. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and a chill ran down his spine. He turned quickly, expecting to see someone behind him, but there was no one there. Just the dark forest and the whispers that seemed to close in around him. For a moment, he considered running back to his car and leaving the cabin behind forever. But something held him in place. He needed to know. He needed to find out what was inside. Steeling himself, he took a deep breath and stepped across the threshold into the cabin. As soon as he did, the door slammed shut behind him. The door slammed with such force that it shook the walls of the cabin. The sound echoed in the silence, followed by a heavy, suffocating stillness. The photographer's heart raced, his breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. He fumbled in the darkness, trying to find something, anything, to ground himself, but the pitch-black interior of the cabin seemed to stretch endlessly, swallowing him whole. For a moment, all was still. The whispers, the shadows, the oppressive weight of the cabin's presence. Everything hung in the air, frozen. Then, as if released from a spell, the whispers returned, louder, more insistent than before. They circled him, their unintelligible murmurs growing more frantic. Panic surged through his veins as he pressed his back against the door, trying to force it open. But no matter how hard he pushed, it wouldn't budge. It was as though the door had fused to the frame, sealing him inside with whatever lurked in the shadows. His eyes strained against the darkness, trying to make sense of his surroundings. There was no light, no visible shape of the room he had entered. Only the overwhelming sensation that he was not alone. The figures from the window, the ones that had appeared in his photographs, were somewhere in the cabin. He could feel them. Then, out of the corner of his eye, movement. A figure, barely visible in the dark, stood across the room. Its silhouette was unmistakable, tall, human-like, but distorted, its features blurred and shifting. It seemed to float, its form flickering in and out of the shadows, as if it were part of the darkness itself. The photographer froze, his blood running cold. He had seen the figure before, in the photos, at the window. But now, here it was standing in front of him, real and terrifying. He tried to move, but his feet felt glued to the floor, his body paralyzed by fear. The figure remained motionless for a moment, as though studying him. Then, slowly, it began to move toward him. Its movements were slow, deliberate, as though savoring the moment. The whispers grew louder with each step it took, filling the room with an overwhelming sense of dread. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. His mind raced, searching for an escape, but there was none. The cabin had him trapped, and the figure was closing in. As it drew nearer, he could make out more details. Its face, or what remained of it, was a twisted, grotesque mask of decay. Hollow eyes stared at him, empty and lifeless, yet somehow filled with a malevolent intent. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping so rapidly that his breath formed visible clouds in front of him. His body shivered uncontrollably, not just from the cold, but from the sheer terror of what was happening. Just as the figure was about to reach him, the whispers stopped. Silence fell over the cabin once again, the stillness more unsettling than the noise. The figure halted, inches away from him, its hollow eyes locked onto his. Time seemed to stretch out, the moment hanging in the air like a knife's edge. Then, without warning, the figure vanished. The photographer gasped, his body finally released from its paralysis. He stumbled backward, his hands scrambling for the door behind him, but it still wouldn't open. His mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. Was it real? Was any of this real? Or was the cabin playing tricks on him, feeding off his fear? His heart pounded in his chest as he backed away from the door, his eyes darting around the room. The darkness seemed to pulse with life, the shadows shifting and twisting as though they were alive. And then, from deep within the cabin, he heard it, a low, guttural voice, far more distinct than the whispers that had plagued him before. "Leave now." The voice was barely a whisper, but it was clear. It came from somewhere deeper in the cabin, from a place he couldn't see. He hesitated, his mind torn between the instinct to flee and the insatiable curiosity that had brought him here in the first place. "Leave, or you'll never escape." The voice grew louder, more urgent, as though whatever was speaking was losing control. He knew he had to get out, but the door was still sealed shut, and the windows were barred with thick, rusted iron. Panic clawed at him as he realized the full weight of his predicament. There was no way out, but then a thought struck him. The cellar. He had seen it earlier, just outside the cabin, a small, weathered door leading down beneath the house. If the front door was sealed, maybe he could escape through there. It was a long shot, but it was the only chance he had. Without wasting another second, he bolted for the nearest wall, feeling his way through the darkness. His hands grazed the rough wood as he searched for the door he knew had to be there. The whispers began again, louder this time, screaming in his ears, urging him to stop, to turn back. But he pressed on, ignoring the noise, ignoring the terror gnawing at his insides. Finally, his hands found the cellar door. He yanked it open, a musty, cold air hitting him as he descended into the pitch-black void below. The steps creaked under his weight, each one echoing ominously as he made his way deeper into the earth. But as he reached the bottom, a new horror awaited him. The whispers were gone, replaced by something far worse. At the bottom of the stairs, the photographer found himself in a narrow, claustrophobic cellar. The air was damp, heavy with the stench of rot and decay. His heart pounded in his chest as he fumbled for a light, but his flashlight was still dead. He took a deep breath and pressed forward, feeling his way through the darkness. The silence was absolute now, an oppressive weight that hung in the air. The whispers, the figures, the presence that had filled the cabin, all of it was gone. But the absence of sound brought no comfort. Instead, it filled him with a new kind of dread, the kind that comes from knowing something terrible is lurking just out of sight. His hand brushed against something cold and metallic. He pulled back, his fingers trembling. It felt like a door, not the kind that would lead outside, but something older, something meant to keep things locked away. He hesitated, fear gnawing at his mind. But his curiosity, the same force that had driven him to this place, wouldn't let him turn back now. He pushed the door open. The creak echoed in the silence, sending a chill down his spine. On the other side, there was a room, dimly lit by a strange, flickering glow. His eyes struggled to adjust to the light as he stepped inside, but what he saw stopped him cold. The room was filled with old, decaying furniture, covered in dust and cobwebs. In the center of the room stood a table, and on it, a single candle flickered weakly. But it wasn't the furniture or the candle that made his blood run cold. It was the figures. They were all there. The same figures from his photographs. The same shadowy shapes that had watched him from the cabin. Only now, they weren't shadows. They were people, or rather, what was left of them. Their faces were gaunt, their skin stretched tight over their bones. Their eyes were hollow, lifeless, yet somehow filled with an unbearable sadness. They stood around the table, motionless, as though waiting for something. The photographer's breath caught in his throat. He wanted to scream, to run, but his legs wouldn't move. The figures turned their heads slowly, their eyes locking onto him. And then, as one, they began to speak. "Join us." The words were a low, raspy whisper, barely audible, but they echoed in his mind with deafening clarity. His heart raced, his body frozen in place as the figures took a step toward him, their hollow eyes never leaving his. He knew then that there was no escape. The cabin had claimed him, just as it had claimed them. The legends were true. The whispers were not just the wind. They were the voices of the lost, trapped here, forever bound to the cursed place. And now, they wanted him to join them. In a final, desperate act, he turned and bolted for the door. His feet pounded against the floor as he scrambled up the stairs, his mind consumed by panic. He reached the top and threw himself against the door, praying that it would open. To his shock, it did. He stumbled outside, gasping for air, the cold night wind hitting him like a wave of relief. He didn't stop to look back. He ran, as fast as his legs would carry him, through the dark woods, the whispers still chasing him, echoing in his mind. But this time, they were different. They were angry. He reached his car, threw open the door, and peeled out of the clearing, the cabin disappearing behind him. But the whispers didn't stop. They followed him, clinging to his thoughts, growing louder with each passing mile. By the time he reached the village, he was a wreck. He stumbled into the same cafe where he had met the old woman, his hands shaking, his breath ragged. She was there, as though waiting for him. "I told you," she said softly, her eyes filled with pity. "You shouldn't have gone back." He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The whispers, louder now than ever before, drowned out his thoughts. He could feel them, inside his mind, inside his very soul. "You can't escape them now," the old woman said, her voice barely audible over the din. "They'll follow you. Forever." The photographer looked at her, his eyes wide with terror. He knew she was right. The cabin had marked him, and no matter where he went, the whispers would never leave him. He left the cafe without another word, the whispers echoing in his ears, louder and louder with each step. The legend of the haunted cabin was no longer just a story, it was his reality. As he drove away, the village disappearing in the rearview mirror, he heard them one last time. "Join us." The camera in the passenger seat flickered to life, its screen glowing faintly in the darkness. And that concludes the story of Midnight Whispers, the legend of the haunted cabin. If you enjoyed this terrifying journey, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more spine-chilling tales. Your support helps keep these haunting stories coming. And who knows, maybe next time, you'll be the one whispering in the dark. In a small, forgotten village nestled at the edge of a dense forest, there stands an old mansion, a relic from a time long past. Its once grand facade now crumbles under the weight of neglect, its windows shattered and doors hanging precariously on rusted hinges. The air around it feels heavy, as if the very atmosphere clings to the secrets it harbors, whispering of things better left undiscovered. For years, the mansion has been the subject of quiet whispers among the villagers, a topic no one dares to speak of too openly. Yet, despite their silence, a few brave or foolish souls have ventured inside. None of them ever returned. Local legends speak of strange disappearances, mysterious noises, and, most chillingly, shadows that move on their own. These sinister tales, however, have only fueled the curiosity of outsiders. Enter our protagonist, a young investigator drawn to the village by these very rumors. He's heard the stories, the ones that send chills down your spine and make your pulse quicken with both fear and excitement. Unlike the locals, he's not one to be easily frightened by tall tales. He seeks the truth, and the more terrifying the mystery, the more determined he becomes to uncover it. The first night he arrives in the village, he can already feel the unease in the air. The villagers are quiet, their gazes suspicious, as though they know something they're unwilling to share. At the local tavern, the bartender offers a word of advice. Stay away from the old mansion, he says with a gravely serious tone. Whatever you're looking for in there, you won't like what you find. But of course, warnings like that only serve to heighten the investigator's resolve. He's dealt with local superstition before. This is different, though. The way the man spoke, the way the other patrons nervously shifted in their seats, it wasn't just fear of the unknown. It was as if they knew something more, something tangible, something real. The next day, the investigator stands at the entrance of the mansion, staring up at its decaying structure. The sun struggles to break through the thick canopy of trees surrounding the property, casting long, eerie shadows across the ground. As he takes his first step toward the mansion, a cold shiver runs down his spine, but he shakes it off. Fear is part of the job. As he crosses the threshold into the mansion, the air feels colder, heavier, like it's pressing down on him. Dust swirls in the weak light streaming through the broken windows, and every creak of the floorboards echoes through the empty halls. For a moment, he wonders if this place is truly abandoned, but the feeling of being watched is impossible to shake. Inside, the mansion is a labyrinth of forgotten rooms and decaying furniture. The walls are cracked, and the ceiling sags dangerously in places. Despite its state of disrepair, there's something unsettlingly alive about the place, as if it's been waiting for someone to come along. He explores carefully, his flashlight sweeping across the dilapidated interior. He notices faint scuff marks on the floor, like someone, or something, has been here recently. The hairs on the back of his neck stand on end, but he presses on. He didn't come this far to turn back at the first sign of trouble. Then, just as he's about to enter what looks like the old drawing room, he hears it, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper. It's so soft that at first he thinks it might just be the wind. But no, the sound is too deliberate, too purposeful. He freezes, heart pounding in his chest as he listens closely. The whisper comes again, clearer this time. It's low and raspy, like a voice coming from deep within the walls. His instincts scream at him to leave, but his curiosity gets the better of him. Slowly, he steps into the room, shining his flashlight around. The furniture is covered in dust, untouched for years, except for one thing. In the center of the room, on a small table, lies an old photograph. It's covered in grime, but he can make out the figures in the image. A family, 2 parents and a child, standing in front of the mansion. The eerie part? The shadows around them seem unnaturally dark, as if something is lurking just out of sight. As he stares at the photograph, the temperature in the room drops sharply. His breath comes out in visible puffs, and the whispering grows louder, more insistent. He swings his flashlight toward the corner of the room, and for the briefest of moments, he sees it, something moving in the shadows. It's quick, almost too fast to register, but it's there, and it's watching him. His heart races as he realizes the stories might not just be rumors after all. There's something in this mansion, something sinister, and it's been waiting for him. The villagers had warned him, but warnings weren't enough to dissuade someone driven by curiosity. The investigator's mind churned with questions. What had he really seen in the shadows? Could the eerie photograph hold a clue, or was it just a coincidence? There was a puzzle in this old mansion, and he was determined to solve it. The next day, he ventured into the village to dig deeper. He needed answers, and the locals, no matter how reluctant, were his best source. Yet, as he walked the narrow, cobblestone streets, he felt the weight of their eyes on him. Every doorway seemed to hide a pair of watchful gazes. Children stopped playing when he passed, and elderly women whispered behind his back. Whatever it was they knew, it scared them enough to avoid conversation altogether. He approached an old man sitting outside the local tavern, the same one who had been there the night before. "What's really going on with that mansion?" the investigator asked, leaning in as if to coax out a secret. The old man looked up, his cloudy eyes narrowing. "You should have listened," the man rasped. "Once you step inside that house, it don't let you go." Not completely. The investigator, though intrigued, was no stranger to these kinds of cryptic warnings. He pressed further. "I'm not afraid of ghost stories. What happened in that house? Why do people keep disappearing?" The old man let out a slow, shuddering breath. "You don't believe in ghosts, do you? Well, what about shadows that move on their own? What about things that come alive when no one's looking?" The investigator's stomach twisted. The mention of shadows brought back the memory of what he saw, or thought he saw, the previous night. "Go on," he urged. "That house was built by a rich family," the old man began, his voice barely above a whisper. "The father, he dabbled in dark things. Spent years collecting books, relics, things people shouldn't mess with. He thought he could control the darkness. Instead, it controlled him." The story seemed outlandish, but the investigator had heard stranger tales in his line of work. He listened closely as the old man continued. It started with small things, flickering lights, strange sounds. But soon, it wasn't just the house that was changing. It was him. His family tried to escape, but by then it was too late. The shadows, they took them. Took them? The investigator furrowed his brow. "You mean they disappeared?" The old man nodded slowly, as if remembering something painful. "They were consumed by the house, by whatever lives in those shadows. And now, anyone who goes in there, well, you saw something yourself, didn't you?" The investigator didn't answer, but the old man could see the truth in his eyes. "You've been marked," the man said quietly. "It's already begun. The house wants you now." Those words lingered as the investigator left the tavern. He had felt something the night before, something he couldn't explain, but also couldn't shake. The shadows had moved. He'd seen them, but now he had more questions than ever. What was this force? And how was he supposed to face it? That evening, with the old man's story still fresh in his mind, he returned to the mansion. The front door creaked open as though expecting him, the cold, stale air within rushing to greet him once more. As he stepped inside, he noticed subtle changes. Objects had been moved, small things like chairs slightly askew, doors that were closed now left ajar. Someone or something had been here. He ventured deeper into the mansion, flashlight in hand, its beam cutting through the darkness. The deeper he went, the heavier the air became, as if the mansion itself was alive, breathing around him, watching his every move. Every step felt like an intrusion, a violation of the house's will. As he explored the rooms he hadn't dared enter the night before, the investigator began to find more strange evidence. There were faint markings on the walls, scratch marks that ran in erratic, unsettling patterns. In one of the bedrooms, the bed covers were disheveled, as though someone had recently been lying there, though the dust suggested it had been untouched for years. And then, just as he was about to enter the kitchen, a sound, a faint, low whisper. His heart pounded. He knew he wasn't alone. The investigator turned, flashlight trembling slightly in his hand, and caught a glimpse of something dark, moving in the corner of his vision. He swung the light in its direction, but whatever it was had already vanished, slipping back into the shadows. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice betraying a slight tremor. No response, just silence. But then, the whispering resumed. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't his imagination. It was something else. He followed the sound, moving cautiously down the hallway, his every step echoing through the mansion's hollow corridors. The whisper seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, leading him further into the depths of the house. In the dining room, he stopped dead in his tracks. There, in the center of the table, was something new, a book, old and worn, with a cover that seemed to absorb the light. He approached it slowly, feeling the weight of its presence even before he touched it. The book was heavy, its pages yellowed with age, and on the first page, in a scrawled, almost frantic hand, were the words, "They live in the shadows. They cannot be escaped." The investigator's breath caught in his throat. He could feel the eyes of the mansion on him, watching, waiting. He was getting closer to the truth, but at what cost? The discovery of the book felt like a turning point, a confirmation that the mansion held far darker secrets than he had anticipated. It wasn't just an abandoned building. It was a place of power, where the boundaries between the living and something else blurred. As the investigator flipped through the pages, he found notes scrawled in different hands, some neat and orderly, others hurried and erratic. They all seemed to reference the same thing: the shadows. The shadows are alive. One entry read, "They watch, they wait. They take what they need and leave nothing behind." Each new passage added to the growing sense of dread. One note mentioned how the mansion's former owner had tried to communicate with these entities, seeking knowledge that should never have been sought. Another entry described strange rituals, cryptic symbols, and sacrifices. The more the investigator read, the more he felt like he was peering into a mind unraveling under the weight of its own discovery. But it wasn't just the contents of the book that troubled him. It was the unmistakable feeling that he was being watched. Every time he paused, every time he let the silence settle for just a moment too long, he could feel it, a presence in the room, a weight that pressed down on him from all sides. He snapped the book shut and placed it back on the table. He had to keep moving. The mansion wasn't just filled with mysteries, it was alive with them. The shadows, the whispers, they weren't random. They were guiding him, pulling him deeper into the house's dark heart. As he continued exploring, he couldn't help but notice how the shadows seemed to cling to him more tightly now. They stretched unnaturally across the walls and floors, shifting subtly when he wasn't looking. Every so often, he would catch a glimpse of movement out of the corner of his eye, only for it to disappear when he turned to look directly at it. The whispering grew louder, more distinct. What once seemed like faint, unintelligible murmurs now carried words that chilled him to the bone. "Stay. Leave. Come closer." The conflicting commands only added to his growing confusion. But despite the terror building inside him, he couldn't leave. Not yet. He was too close to the truth, too close to understanding what had happened in this mansion all those years ago. The next room he entered was the study, a grand space lined with towering bookshelves and heavy, dust-covered furniture. At the far end of the room, a large, ornate desk sat beneath a window, the pale light of the setting sun casting long shadows across its surface. As he approached the desk, he noticed something odd. The shadows in this room were different. They didn't just shift and move. They seemed to be gathering, slowly coalescing into darker, more defined shapes. His heart pounded as he realized what was happening. The shadows weren't just a trick of the light. They were something else, something far more sinister. And then he saw it. A figure, standing at the edge of the room, cloaked in darkness. At first, it seemed like just another shadow, but as he stared, its form became clearer. It was tall, unnaturally so, with limbs that seemed to stretch far beyond human proportions. Its face, or what should have been its face, was nothing but a void, an empty blackness that seemed to swallow the light around it. The investigator froze, every muscle in his body tensing in fear. He had come face to face with the source of the legends, the very thing that had haunted this mansion for decades. And now it was watching him. For a moment, neither of them moved. The silence in the room was deafening. broken only by the faint whispering that now seemed to come from the figure itself. The shadows around the room began to shift, crawling toward him like living things, eager to envelop him. Instinct kicked in. He backed away slowly, his flashlight beam flickering as though the very presence of the figure was draining its power. But no matter how far he stepped back, the shadows followed, creeping closer and closer. He needed to get out now. Without looking away from the figure, he fumbled for the door, his hand trembling as he grasped the cold doorknob. With a swift motion, he threw the door open and bolted into the hallway. The shadows recoiled momentarily, but he knew it wouldn't last. They were part of the house, and the house wanted him. He sprinted down the hallway, his footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, as if the mansion itself was calling out to him, urging him to stop, to turn back. But he didn't. He couldn't. Every instinct told him that if he stopped, if he hesitated for even a second, the shadows would take him, just like they had taken so many others. As he ran, he passed rooms he hadn't seen before, rooms that hadn't been there when he first arrived. The mansion was changing, shifting around him, like a living labyrinth designed to trap him within its walls. The layout no longer made sense, but he couldn't stop to think about it. His only goal was escape. At last, he spotted the front door ahead of him, the heavy wooden frame bathed in the dim light of the fading day. Relief surged through him as he reached for the door, but just as his fingers brushed the handle, the whispering stopped. Everything went silent. For a split second, he froze, his hand hovering inches from the door. The silence was so sudden, so complete, that it felt as though the mansion itself had paused, waiting for something. And then, from the darkness behind him, a single word echoed through the air, cold and final. "Stay." The investigator's heart raced as the single, chilling word echoed through the mansion. "Stay." The silence that followed was oppressive, pressing in on him from all sides. He stood frozen, the cold, damp air clinging to his skin, his mind reeling from the enormity of what he had encountered. The mansion had been a maze of shadows and whispers, but now, in this moment of eerie stillness, it felt like a predator waiting to pounce. The shadows seemed to thicken, coalesce, and the air grew colder, heavy with an unnatural presence. His breath came out in visible puffs, merging with the dense fog that had begun to creep along the floor. With every ounce of courage he could muster, the investigator turned around slowly, expecting to see the towering, faceless figure from the study. But as he faced the darkness behind him, he found himself staring into an even deeper void, an inky blackness that seemed to absorb all light and hope. It was as if the mansion itself had become a living, breathing entity, and he was trapped inside its malevolent grasp. His flashlight flickered erratically, casting fleeting, distorted shadows on the walls. The whispers resumed, louder and more frantic than ever, filling the air with a cacophony of voices. They spoke in unison, a haunting chorus that seemed to come from all around him. "Come closer," they urged. "Join us." The investigator's mind raced. He had read about places where the boundaries between worlds could become thin, but he had never imagined experiencing it firsthand. The shadows seemed to reach out toward him, their movements erratic and unsettling, like dark fingers stretching from every corner of the room. Suddenly, a cold wind howled through the mansion, extinguishing his flashlight and plunging him into darkness. Panic surged through him as he fumbled to relight it, his hands shaking uncontrollably. The whispering grew louder, more desperate, and he could feel the temperature drop sharply, as if the house was exhaling a chilling breath. In the pitch-black room, he could hear the sound of movement, soft, shuffling footsteps that grew louder with each passing second. He turned his head rapidly, trying to catch a glimpse of what was approaching him, but all he saw were the shifting shadows that seemed to dance and writhe with a life of their own. A sudden, bone-chilling scream pierced the darkness, followed by an unsettling silence. It was a scream filled with agony and despair, a cry that seemed to echo through the very walls of the mansion. The investigator's blood ran cold as he realized it was the scream of someone, or something, pleading for help. With a surge of adrenaline, he fought against the paralyzing fear and pushed forward through the darkness. He stumbled through the rooms, his hands outstretched, trying to find the way back to the entrance. The mansion seemed to shift and warp around him, the layout changing with every turn, as if it were a labyrinth with no escape. His thoughts were a whirl of confusion and terror. What was this place? What did it want from him? The mansion felt like it was alive, its malevolent presence growing stronger with every step he took. He knew he had to escape before the shadows claimed him, just as they had done with those who came before. Finally, he reached the grand staircase that led to the entrance. The heavy wooden steps creaked under his weight as he ascended, the whispering still echoing in his ears, though now it seemed more distant, like a fading dream. He could see the faint light of the setting sun filtering through the broken windows, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. Just as he was about to reach the top, the mansion seemed to shudder, and the temperature plummeted further. A wall of shadows surged toward him, blocking his path. The investigator was forced to fight through the darkness, using his flashlight as a weapon against the encroaching gloom. The shadows recoiled momentarily, but quickly regrouped, their movements more frantic and aggressive. In a desperate bid to escape, he lunged for the front door. His fingers grasped the cold, iron handle, but the door remained stubbornly shut. He pulled and yanked with all his strength, but it wouldn't budge. The shadows were closing in, their presence oppressive and overwhelming. In a final act of desperation, he hurled himself against the door, his shoulder crashing into the heavy wood. The door groaned in protest, but with one last effort, it creaked open just enough for him to slip through. He stumbled out into the fading daylight, gasping for breath as he collapsed onto the front steps. The cold, fresh air was a stark contrast to the stifling darkness of the mansion. He looked back, expecting to see the shadows spilling out after him, but instead, the mansion stood silent and still, as if nothing had happened. He had escaped, but the experience had left its mark on him. The shadows, the whispers, the darkness, it was all too real, too terrifying. The mansion had tried to keep him, to pull him into its depths, but he had managed to break free. As he staggered away from the mansion, he couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was still watching, waiting for its next chance to claim him. The investigator had survived, but the mansion's sinister secrets would haunt him forever. The investigator had escaped the old mansion, but the chilling experience would linger in his mind forever. As he walked away from the mansion, each step felt heavier, as if the shadows were still clinging to him, reluctant to let him go. The sunlight that had once been a beacon of hope now seemed faint and distant, overshadowed by the darkness he had encountered. His journey through the mansion had revealed more than just a tale of ghostly whispers and malevolent shadows. It had exposed a deep-seated fear, one that transcends the boundaries of the physical world. The mansion wasn't just a place of horrors. It was a manifestation of human dread and curiosity, a reflection of the darkest corners of the soul. As he made his way back to civilization, the investigator couldn't help but reflect on the events that had transpired. The mansion had been a labyrinth of fear, its shadows a living testament to the unknown. He had come seeking answers, but what he found was a reminder of the limits of human understanding. Some mysteries are too profound, too unsettling to be fully grasped. The whispers, the darkness, the presence that had seemed to breathe with a life of its own, they all served as a stark reminder of the thin line that separates reality from the supernatural. The mansion had not only tested his resolve, but also left him with a profound sense of unease, a feeling that would follow him long after he had left its walls. As he approached the village, the familiar sights and sounds seemed oddly comforting, yet the shadow of the mansion still loomed over him. He had survived the ordeal, but the mansion's dark legacy had become a part of him. The chilling whispers, the haunting shadows, they would remain in his memory, a constant reminder of the night he faced the sinister forces that lurked within the old mansion. But the story didn't end with his escape. The mansion remained, a dark and foreboding presence in the heart of the countryside. It was a place where shadows held sway, where the boundaries between the living and the dead were thin and fragile. And though the investigator had left its cursed walls behind, the mansion's grip on him was far from over. As he settled back into his normal life, the investigator couldn't shake the feeling that the mansion was still reaching out, still trying to pull him back into its dark embrace. The shadows were not just a part of the mansion. They had become a part of him, a constant reminder of the fear and curiosity that had driven him to explore its depths. In sharing his story, the investigator hoped to offer a glimpse into the darkness that had consumed him, to shed light on the sinister forces that had been at play. The mansion was a reminder of the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding, the fears that dwell in the shadows, and the limits of human courage. And now, as the video draws to a close, the investigator turns to you, the viewer. If you've been captivated by this tale of terror and intrigue, if the chilling whispers and shadowy figures have left you with a sense of wonder and dread, there's more where that came from. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling stories and investigations into the unknown. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video and want to see more content that delves into the darker side of reality. Your support helps us bring more tales of the eerie and mysterious to light. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the shadows aren't as far away as you might think. As the sun sets on the horizon, the coast takes on a golden hue, shrouded in a deepening mystery. The lighthouse, proudly standing on a cliff's edge, juts out against the reddening sky. Its ancient and weathered structure, with its light flickering erratically, sends distress signals to the calm sea below. James, the new keeper, arrives with the last boat that takes him to the isolated location. Burdened with his luggage and a growing sense of unease, he gazes at the lighthouse with a mix of respect and apprehension. Assigned as its new caretaker indefinitely, he reflects on the eerie tale surrounding the place after the previous keeper's inexplicable death. He tries to dismiss these dark thoughts as he crosses the creaky rope bridge leading to the lighthouse, feeling the cold wind and the salty tang of the sea. Inside the lighthouse, the atmosphere is one of abandonment. Dust-covered furniture and cracked, foggy windows let in only fragments of light. The sound of the lighthouse's beam turning and the distant crash of waves intensify the solitude of the place. James makes an effort to organize his belongings and settle in, but the silence is unsettling, as if the lighthouse itself is watching his every move. As he explores the interior, James discovers old documents, faded photographs of past keepers, and a series of nautical books, some with torn pages. In a corner of the control room, he finds an old diary hidden behind a shelf. The pages, yellowed with age, are filled with disjointed notes and strange drawings that seem to depict something beyond description. Among the entries is a dated note from 30 years ago mentioning a presence in the lighthouse, a force that should not be there. The first night proves especially unnerving. James is jolted awake by heavy footsteps in the corridors, despite being certain he is alone. He tries to dismiss the sounds as the natural creaking of the building, but the feeling that something is wrong lingers. In the middle of the night, the lighthouse starts flashing erratically, a feature that the old residents always attributed to an unexplained anomaly. James attempts to fix the issue, but the equipment seems to function oddly, as if an invisible force is interfering. The following morning, the coast appears tranquil, yet something has changed. James notices that the lighthouse's light seems to shine more intensely, as though trying to communicate. He receives an unexpected visit from an old sailor who claims to know the history of the lighthouse and its dark secrets, adding to the growing tension. James spends his second day in the lighthouse trying to establish a routine amidst the unsettling atmosphere. He meticulously checks the lighthouse's mechanisms, hoping that yesterday's erratic behavior was just a fluke. However, as he works, he can't shake the feeling that he's being watched. The air feels heavier, and every creak of the floorboard seems more pronounced. In the early afternoon, James decides to explore the surrounding area. He ventures out to the rocky cliffs and discovers an old, overgrown path leading to a secluded beach. The beach, littered with driftwood and seashells, seems oddly out of place. As he inspects the area, he finds an old, rusted lantern buried in the sand. It's an antique, resembling the ones used by early lighthouse keepers. Intrigued, James takes it back to the lighthouse, pondering its origins. Upon returning, James notices that the lantern's glass is cracked, and inside, there is a faded photograph of a man in a lighthouse uniform. The photo looks old, and the man's stern expression gives James an eerie feeling. He places the lantern on a shelf in the control room, feeling a strange connection to the previous keepers of the lighthouse. Later that evening, while James is preparing dinner, the lighthouse's light begins to flicker uncontrollably again. Frustrated, he attempts to adjust the equipment, but the problem persists. As he works, he hears faint whispers coming from the staircase leading to the upper levels. The whispers are too soft to discern, but they send chills down his spine. He dismisses them as the wind or his imagination playing tricks on him. After dinner, James decides to examine the old diary more closely. He reads through the disjointed notes and sketches, trying to make sense of the cryptic messages. One entry stands out. The light reveals what the eyes cannot see. Beware the shadow that moves when the light fails. The entry makes little sense to him, but he can't shake the feeling that it's a warning. As night falls, James sets up a video camera in the control room to monitor the lighthouse's light. He hopes to capture any irregularities and prove that the flickering is just a mechanical issue. While reviewing the footage from earlier in the day, he notices something disturbing, a shadow moving across the control room that doesn't align with the light beam. The shadow appears to move independently, as if something unseen is moving through the room. Unable to explain the shadow, James feels a growing sense of dread. He decides to spend the night in the control room, hoping that by staying alert, he can uncover the source of the disturbances. As the hours pass, the lighthouse's light continues its erratic behavior, and the whispers become louder, though still unintelligible. James's nerves are frayed, and he can't help but feel that he's on the verge of discovering something terrible. At midnight, the lighthouse's light suddenly goes out completely, plunging the room into darkness. The whispers turn into frantic, indistinguishable voices, and James hears a loud banging sound from above. He shines a flashlight towards the staircase, but the beam reveals nothing but darkness. Summoning his courage, James ascends the stairs to investigate, each step echoing eerily in the silence. The upper levels of the lighthouse are just as abandoned as the rest of the building. As James reaches the top, he finds the lantern he discovered earlier now sitting on the floor, its glass cracked further, and the photograph missing. The eerie silence is broken only by the sound of the wind howling through the broken windows. James's heart races as he realizes that the lantern has been moved, and something or someone is playing a cruel game. Exhausted and terrified, James retreats to the control room, determined to uncover the truth behind the shadows and whispers. He knows that whatever is haunting the lighthouse is growing bolder, and he must uncover its secrets before it's too late. The next day, James wakes up feeling drained and disoriented. The events of the previous night have left him on edge, and he struggles to focus on his duties. Determined to understand what is happening, he decides to delve deeper into the history of the lighthouse and its previous keepers. James begins by exploring the dusty storage rooms of the lighthouse, hoping to find more clues. Amidst old maintenance tools and broken equipment, he discovers a box of old records and photographs. Carefully sifting through the documents, he finds a collection of journals and letters from the lighthouse keepers over the years. One set of records stands out: correspondence between keepers discussing mysterious incidents and unexplained phenomena. One letter, dated 20 years ago, describes a series of disturbing events, a series of unexplained mechanical failures, flickering lights, and strange noises. The letter mentions that the keeper at the time reported seeing shadowy figures moving around the lighthouse and hearing disembodied voices. The final entry in the letter is a chilling warning. Something in this place does not want to be disturbed. Beware the shadows and the light that reveals them. James's curiosity is piqued by this letter. He wonders if the strange occurrences he's experiencing are connected to these past events. To further investigate, he decides to visit the local historical society, hoping to find more information about the lighthouse and its history. At the historical society, James meets with an elderly archivist who is knowledgeable about the area. She is intrigued by his story and pulls out old newspapers and records related to the lighthouse. They find reports of a series of accidents and mysterious disappearances involving past keepers. One particular incident catches their attention: the disappearance of a keeper and his family under suspicious circumstances, with no trace left behind except for a cryptic note saying, "The light will guide you to what you seek, but it will also show you what you fear." The archivist shares that local legends speak of a guardian of the lighthouse, an entity that protects a hidden secret. According to these legends, the lighthouse was built on a site of ancient significance, and the disturbances could be linked to something buried or hidden long ago. James is both intrigued and unsettled by this revelation, feeling that he's getting closer to understanding the source of the disturbances. Returning to the lighthouse, James decides to investigate the basement, which he has avoided until now. The basement is damp and filled with old, rotting supplies. As he searches through the clutter, he discovers a hidden compartment behind a wall panel. Inside, he finds a small, wooden chest covered in dust and cobwebs. Opening the chest reveals a collection of old artifacts, nautical charts, ancient keys, and a strange, ornate box. The box is locked, and James is unable to open it without the key. However, the ornate design and the feeling of unease it gives him suggest that it is significant. As night falls, James decides to use the lantern he found on the beach to illuminate his investigation. He places the lantern in the control room and begins to study the artifacts more closely. The light of the lantern casts eerie shadows on the walls, and James feels a growing sense of dread. Suddenly, the control room light flickers and then goes out, plunging him into darkness. The whispers return, louder and more urgent. The shadows on the walls seem to shift and move, and James feels as if he's being watched. In the dim light of the lantern, he sees a figure in the corner of the room, a shadow that seems to have a distinct shape. James grabs a flashlight and shines it toward the shadow, but it disappears, leaving only the unsettling silence behind. He searches the room, but finds nothing out of the ordinary. The lantern's light begins to flicker erratically again, and James realizes that the disturbances are not just mechanical failures, but something far more sinister. Determined to uncover the truth, James decides to spend the night in the control room, hoping that by confronting whatever is haunting the lighthouse, he might find answers. He prepares himself for a long, unsettling night, knowing that the shadows and whispers may hold the key to solving the mystery. As night descends upon the lighthouse, James braces himself for another unsettling evening. The air is thick with anticipation, and the eerie silence is occasionally broken by the distant crash of waves against the cliff. Determined to uncover the truth, James takes a deep breath and settles into the control room, keeping the lantern's light steady despite its occasional flicker. The hours pass slowly, and the darkness seems to grow heavier. The whispers in the control room become louder and more distinct, though still incomprehensible. Shadows dance on the walls, and James can't shake the feeling that something is moving just beyond the edge of the light. His nerves are on edge, and he feels a growing sense of dread as the minutes tick by. Suddenly, the lighthouse's main light goes out completely, plunging the entire building into darkness. The loss of the primary source of light intensifies the already oppressive atmosphere. James fumbles for his flashlight, shining it in every direction, but the beam seems to make the shadows appear even more menacing. The whispers turn into frantic, discordant voices, growing louder and more frantic. In the pitch-black control room, James notices that the old lantern he found earlier is now glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. The lantern's beam flickers and shifts, revealing fleeting glimpses of ghostly figures moving around the room. James feels a cold chill run down his spine as he realizes that these figures seem to be attempting to communicate. Determined to understand what is happening, James examines the ornate box he found in the basement. The box is adorned with strange symbols and appears to be the key to unlocking the mystery. He searches for a way to open it, using the tools he has on hand. As he works, the whispers become louder and more insistent, almost as if urging him to hurry. After what feels like an eternity, James manages to pry open the box. Inside, he finds an ancient manuscript covered in dust and a small, intricately designed key. The manuscript is filled with cryptic text and illustrations depicting the lighthouse and its surroundings. The key appears to fit perfectly into a small, hidden lock on the side of the box. With trembling hands, James uses the key to open a compartment within the box. Inside, He finds a collection of letters and diaries from past keepers, detailing their experiences with the haunting presence. The accounts describe a malevolent force connected to the lighthouse, a force that preys on the fears and weaknesses of those who come near. One letter stands out, detailing a ritual that was used to contain the entity. The ritual involves a specific sequence of actions and incantations performed at the lighthouse's highest point. According to the letter, the ritual was intended to bind the entity to the lighthouse, preventing it from causing further harm. As James reads the letter, the temperature in the control room drops sharply, and the lantern's light flickers wildly. The shadows on the walls begin to coalesce into a more defined form, and James sees the figure of a ghostly figure, the same shadowy presence that has been tormenting him. The figure moves closer, its features becoming more distinct and menacing. Realizing that he must act quickly, James decides to follow the instructions in the manuscript and perform the ritual. He ascends the spiral staircase to the top of the lighthouse, where the wind howls and the light from the lantern casts eerie shadows. The air is charged with a palpable sense of malevolence. At the top of the lighthouse, James sets up the ritual as described in the manuscript. He arranges the artifacts and recites the incantations, his voice trembling with fear. The lighthouse's light begins to flicker and pulse in response, as if reacting to the ritual. As James completes the final incantation, the ghostly figure moves closer, its form now clearly visible. The figure reaches out towards James, and the temperature drops even further. James can feel the presence pressing in on him, its malevolent energy suffocating. With a final, desperate effort, James completes the ritual. The lighthouse's light blazes brightly, and the ghostly figure lets out a chilling, anguished scream before vanishing into the light. The whispers and shadows dissipate, and the oppressive atmosphere lifts, leaving James alone in the stillness of the night. Exhausted and shaken, James collapses on the floor of the lighthouse. The light of the lighthouse shines steadily once again, and the oppressive darkness is replaced by a calm, peaceful silence. James realizes that the entity has been banished, at least for now. With the oppressive darkness and malevolent presence seemingly banished, James remains on edge but relieved. The lighthouse's light shines steadily, casting a reassuring glow over the now tranquil surroundings. Exhausted and emotionally drained, James collapses on the floor, trying to process the harrowing events of the past few days. As dawn breaks, the first light of morning filters through the cracked windows, offering a sense of calm and normalcy. The lighthouse, once a place of terror, now feels almost serene. James begins to tidy up the control room, putting away the artifacts and organizing the manuscripts. He can't help but reflect on the strange and terrifying experiences he's had and the mystery that has finally been unveiled. James decides to take one last look at the manuscript and letters he discovered. As he reads through them, he notices a final entry, a letter from a previous keeper that was not mentioned before. The letter reveals a chilling truth. The entity bound to the lighthouse is not entirely gone. It is dormant, but can be awakened if disturbed. The letter warns that the lighthouse must be carefully maintained and respected, or the malevolent presence could return. James is troubled by this revelation, but resolves to honor the legacy of the previous keepers by ensuring the lighthouse remains a place of safety. He prepares to leave, taking with him the artifacts and manuscripts as evidence of the lighthouse's dark history. As he prepares to depart, the old sailor he met earlier arrives at the lighthouse, his face etched with concern. The sailor has been following the strange occurrences and is relieved to see that James has survived. He shares that he has heard of other mysterious events related to the lighthouse, and he is grateful that James has confronted the entity. The sailor offers to help James with the documentation and ensure that the lighthouse's story is preserved. James agrees to work with the sailor, knowing that their collaboration will help shed light on the lighthouse's dark past and protect future keepers. They make plans to share the story with the local community and ensure that the lighthouse is properly maintained to prevent any further disturbances. As James finally leaves the lighthouse, he takes one last look at the imposing structure. The light continues to shine brightly, a beacon of hope and safety after the darkness that had plagued it. He feels a sense of accomplishment and closure, knowing that he has played a crucial role in uncovering the truth and protecting others from the same fate. Back in the safety of his home, James reflects on his experience and the importance of understanding and respecting the unknown. The lighthouse stands as a reminder of the fine line between light and darkness, and the vigilance required to keep that balance. If you enjoyed this harrowing journey into the heart of darkness, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more spine-chilling tales and thrilling mysteries. Hit the like button if you found this story captivating, and leave a comment to share your thoughts or suggest future topics. Your support helps us continue bringing you the best in horror and suspense. As twilight falls over the small, secluded town, the old manor on the edge of town stands silent and imposing. Its towering spires and ivy-clad walls cast long shadows over the overgrown garden. Once a symbol of opulence, the manor now looms as a relic of a bygone era, its grandeur faded and its windows darkened. The townsfolk speak of the manor in hushed tones, recounting tales of its mysterious past and the whispers that seem to emanate from its crumbling walls. Emily, an aspiring investigative journalist, arrives at the manor with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Her curiosity is piqued by the numerous stories of paranormal activity and inexplicable occurrences associated with the manor. She has been assigned to uncover the truth behind these legends and document her findings. As she approaches the manor, the overgrown path crunches underfoot, and the air is thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. Emily unlocks the heavy, ornate front door, which creaks open with a groan that echoes through the empty halls. The manor's interior is just as foreboding as its exterior. Dust-laden furniture draped in sheets, faded portraits hanging crookedly on the walls, and a chill that seems to settle in the bones. Emily sets up her equipment in what appears to have once been the grand foyer. The once magnificent chandelier now hangs precariously, and the grand staircase, covered in layers of dust, winds upward into darkness. She begins to explore, her flashlight casting long, eerie shadows as she moves through the manor's many rooms. In the library, Emily discovers rows of old, leather-bound books and dusty shelves. Among them, she finds a journal bound in cracked leather. The journal's pages are filled with cryptic notes and sketches that depict strange symbols and unsettling imagery. The last entry, dated over 50 years ago, is particularly disturbing. The voices are growing louder. They speak of the darkness within these walls. I fear what they might awaken. Intrigued and unsettled, Emily continues her exploration. She ventures into the manor's basement, a place the locals have described as the heart of the haunting. The basement is a labyrinth of old storage rooms, each filled with broken furniture and discarded items. As she explores, she hears a faint whispering sound, but when she stops to listen, it fades away. She dismisses it as the creaks of the old house, though the whispering leaves her feeling uneasy. As night falls, Emily sets up cameras and audio recorders throughout the manor, determined to capture any evidence of the paranormal. She feels a growing sense of anticipation and dread, knowing that the true investigation is about to begin. The manor's silence is punctuated only by the occasional rustle of wind outside and the distant creak of the old house settling. Sitting alone in the grand foyer, Emily reviews the footage from the cameras and listens to the audio recordings. The recordings are mostly silent, but there are occasional, faint whispers that seem to be just out of reach. She checks the cameras for any anomalies and is surprised to find that the footage from one of the cameras in the basement shows a shadowy figure moving across the screen. The figure appears for only a brief moment before vanishing, leaving Emily with a sense of dread. As she prepares to retire for the night, Emily feels a chill in the air and hears the whispering again, more distinct this time. She follows the sound to a small, locked door she had previously overlooked. The door leads to a narrow, forgotten room that appears to have been sealed off for years. Emily's curiosity gets the better of her, and she decides to investigate further, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. Unlocking the door, she enters the room and finds it filled with old, musty items and a single, large mirror covered in a sheet. The air is heavy with dust, and the room feels unnaturally cold. As Emily pulls the sheet from the mirror, she sees her reflection, pale and drawn, staring back at her. But behind her reflection, she notices a fleeting shadow, a dark shape that seems to move on its own. Emily's heart races as she realizes that the shadow is not a trick of the light, but a presence that lurks within the walls. The whispers grow louder, and the air feels charged with a palpable sense of malevolence. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily resolves to delve deeper into the manor's history and its dark secrets. The dawn of a new day brings no relief to Emily, who spent the night grappling with the unsettling discoveries from the previous evening. The manor's oppressive atmosphere hangs over her as she sets out to research its history. Armed with the journal she found and a growing sense of unease, Emily is determined to uncover the truth behind the whispers in the walls. Emily heads to the local library, a small, historic building that holds the town's archives. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson, is intrigued by Emily's investigation and offers to help. Together, they delve into old newspapers, town records, and historical documents, piecing together the manor's past. Through their research, Emily learns that the manor was built in the late 1800s by the affluent Hawthorne family. The manor was once a center of social activity and prosperity, but tragedy struck when the youngest Hawthorne child, a girl named Eleanor, vanished under mysterious circumstances. The family was never the same, and rumors of a curse and paranormal activity began circulating around the manor. Emily discovers that Eleanor's disappearance was never solved. Some believe she was taken by a stranger, while others whispered about supernatural forces at play. The local townsfolk reported seeing strange lights and hearing eerie sounds emanating from the manor long after the Hawthornes left. Among the documents, Emily finds a handwritten letter from Eleanor's father, written just before the family left the manor. The letter is filled with anguish and desperation, mentioning a dark force that had begun to plague their home. The letter ends with a plea for someone to uncover the truth and put an end to the torment. With this new information, Emily returns to the manor, determined to explore the locations tied to Eleanor's disappearance. She starts by revisiting the locked room she discovered the night before. The room, now illuminated by the morning light, reveals more details. In addition to the mirror, there is a small, ornate chest partially hidden under a pile of old linens. Emily opens the chest with care and finds several old items: a locket with a faded photograph of Eleanor, a music box, and a journal with entries in a child's handwriting. The journal details Eleanor's fears of a presence in the house, describing how she would hear whispers coming from the walls at night. Eleanor's final entries are filled with a sense of foreboding, mentioning a hidden room and a growing darkness that seemed to close in on her. The music box, when opened, plays a hauntingly familiar tune that echoes through the empty manor. As the melody fills the room, Emily feels a chill run down her spine. The journal also references a hidden passage in the manor, one that Eleanor believed was connected to the dark force. Determined to find the hidden passage, Emily scours the manor for clues. Her search leads her to a series of old architectural blueprints she finds in the library. The blueprints reveal an unknown room hidden behind the walls of the manor, accessible only through a secret door. The blueprints also indicate that the room was part of the manor's original design, suggesting it was intentionally concealed. Emily follows the blueprint's instructions and locates the hidden door, which is concealed behind a large bookcase in the library. With effort, she manages to open the door, revealing a narrow, dimly lit staircase that descends into the darkness below. The air grows colder as she descends, and the whispering sounds become more distinct and urgent. At the bottom of the staircase, Emily finds herself in a small, hidden chamber. The room is lined with shelves filled with old, dusty tomes and strange artifacts. In the center of the room stands an elaborate ritual altar covered in symbols and inscriptions. The altar's surface is etched with similar symbols to those found in Eleanor's journal, suggesting a connection between the rituals and the supernatural occurrences in the manor. Emily carefully examines the artifacts and the altar, trying to decipher their meaning. The symbols appear to be part of an occult ritual, potentially related to the dark force that plagued Eleanor and her family. She finds a book on the altar that describes a ritual meant to summon or communicate with entities from beyond, providing disturbing insights into the manor's dark history. As Emily studies the book, she realizes that the whispers she has been hearing are not random, but part of an ongoing ritual. The whisper seemed to be a communication channel for the entity bound within the manor's walls. The ritual's purpose was to control or appease the entity, but it appears that it has become more powerful over time. The discovery leaves Emily shaken. She understands that the manor's haunting is not merely a series of random events, but the result of a ritual gone wrong. The dark force remains trapped in the manor, feeding off the fears and emotions of those who enter. Emily knows she must find a way to end the ritual and put an end to the haunting once and for all. Armed with the revelations from the hidden chamber, Emily is more determined than ever to uncover the truth behind the haunting of the manor. She realizes that the key to resolving the disturbances may lie in understanding and potentially dismantling the occult rituals described in the book. Her next steps involve piecing together the ritual's components and discovering how they were intended to control or summon the dark force. Emily begins by researching the symbols and rituals in the occult book she found. She visits a local historian who specializes in the supernatural, hoping to gain more insight into the arcane practices described in the book. The historian, a middle-aged man named Dr. Harrison, is intrigued by Emily's findings and agrees to help her decipher the ancient symbols and ritual instructions. Together, Emily and Dr. Harrison work through the text, identifying symbols and practices used in occult rituals throughout history. They find that the symbols on the altar are associated with binding and communication rituals, meant to control entities from other realms. The book details a ritual that involves specific timings and offerings to keep the entity subdued. As they delve deeper, Dr. Harrison explains that the dark force in the manor might have been bound or appeased by the Hawthorne family's ritual, but the binding may have weakened over time. The entity could have grown stronger or more malevolent, leading to the current haunting. Armed with this knowledge, Emily returns to the manor with a renewed sense of purpose. She decides to perform a ritual to attempt to banish or neutralize the dark force. She prepares by gathering the necessary items mentioned in the book: candles, incense, and specific offerings described in the ritual. Emily also plans to perform the ritual in the hidden chamber, where the dark force seems to be most concentrated. As night falls, Emily sets up the ritual space. The manor is eerily quiet, and the shadows cast by the flickering candles seem to dance on the walls. Emily lights the candles and places the offerings on the altar, following the instructions in the book with meticulous care. She recites the incantations, her voice steady despite the growing sense of dread. As Emily completes the ritual, the atmosphere in the manor changes. The air grows thick and heavy, and the whispering voices become more insistent. The shadows in the hidden chamber seem to coalesce into a more defined shape, and a cold wind sweeps through the room. Emily's heart races as she feels the presence of the dark force more strongly than ever before. The whispers turn into an anguished wail, and the temperature drops sharply. Emily can see the shadowy figure more clearly now. It is a spectral presence, its form shifting and writhing as if in pain. The figure moves closer, and Emily can feel a palpable sense of malevolence emanating from it. She continues the ritual, determined to complete it despite the mounting fear. Suddenly, the room's temperature spikes, and the candles flicker violently. The dark figure seems to be reacting to the ritual, its movements becoming erratic and frantic. Emily pushes through the fear, finishing the final incantations with a sense of urgency. She feels a rush of energy as the ritual reaches its climax, and the dark figure lets out a final, piercing scream before dissipating into the shadows. The whispering fades, and the oppressive atmosphere lifts. The hidden chamber feels calmer, and the shadows on the walls recede. Emily, exhausted but resolute, knows that the ritual has made a significant impact on the dark force. She takes a moment to collect herself and reflects on the ordeal she has faced. The following morning, Emily reviews the footage from her cameras and audio recorders. To her relief, the recordings show that the dark figure and the whispers have disappeared. The manor feels different, lighter, as if the weight of the haunting has been lifted. However, Emily remains cautious. She understands that the dark force may not be completely gone, but merely subdued. She decides to document her findings and share the story with the public, ensuring that the history of the manor and the truth behind the haunting are preserved. Emily prepares to leave the manor, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. The manor has been a place of both terror and revelation, and she knows that its story is far from over. As she drives away, she takes one last look at the imposing structure, feeling a sense of accomplishment and closure. With the dark force seemingly subdued and the manor's oppressive atmosphere lifted, Emily prepares to finalize her investigation. She has gathered significant evidence and documented her experiences, but she knows that understanding the full scope of the manor's history and the nature of the haunting is crucial before she leaves. Determined to leave no stone unturned, Emily contacts a local historian and paranormal expert, Dr. Harrison, for a final consultation. They meet at the library to discuss their findings and piece together the remaining mysteries of the manor. Dr. Harrison reviews Emily's notes and the footage from the hidden chamber. He is particularly interested in the ancient journal and the occult book that Emily found. As they analyze the materials, Dr. Harrison reveals that the symbols and rituals described in the book are part of an ancient practice used to bind or communicate with supernatural entities. The dark force at the manor may have been linked to a long-standing curse or a failed attempt to control a powerful entity. Dr. Harrison also explains that the Hawthorne family's involvement in the occult may have been more than just a matter of interest. It could have been an attempt to protect themselves from or control the entity. The family's tragic fate and the disappearance of Eleanor could be connected to their attempts to manage the dark force, which may have ultimately spiraled out of control. Emily and Dr. Harrison decide to conduct a final, thorough investigation of the manor's historical records. They search for any additional clues that might provide insight into the Hawthorne family's activities and the origins of the dark force. During their research, they discover an old diary belonging to Eleanor's mother, which had been hidden among other historical documents. The diary reveals that Eleanor's family was deeply involved in occult practices, driven by a belief that they were protecting themselves from a malevolent entity. The entries detail a series of rituals and sacrifices intended to control the entity, but also describe the growing fear and desperation of the family as the dark force became increasingly malevolent. One entry stands out. It describes a final, desperate attempt to seal the entity away completely. The ritual, intended to be performed during a rare celestial event, was never completed due to the sudden and mysterious disappearance of Eleanor. The diary's last entry expresses a chilling premonition that the entity might one day escape if the ritual was not completed. Armed with this new information, Emily realizes that the manor's haunting was not just a result of a single failed ritual, but a culmination of a long history of attempts to control a powerful and malevolent entity. The dark force's presence was a result of these failed attempts and the family's ongoing struggle to contain it. As Emily and Dr. Harrison prepare to leave the manor, they decide to share their findings with the local community and ensure that the manor's history is preserved. They plan to publish their research and document the haunting in a detailed report, shedding light on the true nature of the dark force and the Hawthorne family's tragic story. Emily also makes arrangements to have the manor properly maintained and monitored. She believes that while the immediate threat may have been subdued, the manor's history and the dark force's lingering presence should be handled with care and respect. As she walks through the now peaceful manor one last time, Emily reflects on the journey she has undertaken. The manor, once a place of fear and darkness, now stands as a testament to the strength of human curiosity and determination. The whispers in the walls may have been silenced, but the story of the manor and its haunting will continue to resonate. Emily leaves the manor with a sense of accomplishment and a deeper understanding of the mysteries she has uncovered. The experience has changed her perspective on the supernatural and the importance of uncovering the truth behind the unknown. As dawn breaks over the manor, Emily stands outside, taking a final look at the imposing structure that has been the center of her investigation. The manor, now bathed in the early morning light, seems almost tranquil, a stark contrast to the dark events that unfolded within its walls. Emily has spent the last few days documenting her findings and preparing a detailed report. The manor's dark history and the supernatural occurrences she experienced have been meticulously recorded. The report will not only reveal the truth behind the haunting, but also serve as a critical piece of local history. She reviews her notes one last time, ensuring that every detail is accurate and every revelation is presented clearly. The report highlights the origins of the dark force the failed rituals, and the tragic fate of the Hawthorne family. It also includes the steps she took to subdue the entity and the ongoing need for caution. As Emily prepares to leave, she hears the distant sound of footsteps approaching. It's the local historian, Dr. Harrison, who has come to assist with the final stages of the investigation. He carries a box containing the collected artifacts, including the occult book, Eleanor's journal, and the items from the hidden chamber. Dr. Harrison and Emily take a moment to reflect on the journey they have undertaken. They discuss the significance of their findings and the implications for understanding the supernatural. Dr. Harrison emphasizes that while the immediate threat has been addressed, the manor's history remains a powerful reminder of the unknown. The local authorities and community leaders are scheduled to meet later that day to review Emily's report and discuss the manor's future. Emily is invited to present her findings and share her experiences. As she prepares for the presentation, she feels a mix of anticipation and anxiety. The meeting takes place in the town hall, where Emily presents her report to a room full of interested residents and officials. She recounts the events of her investigation, the history of the manor, and the details of the ritual she performed. The audience listens intently, captivated by the story of the haunted manor and the dark force that once plagued it. Emily's presentation concludes with a powerful message about the importance of preserving history and respecting the unknown. She emphasizes that the manor's story is a testament to the enduring curiosity and courage of those who seek to understand the mysteries of the past. The local authorities decide to honor Emily's findings by establishing a preservation fund for the manor. The fund will ensure that the manor is properly maintained and that its history is preserved for future generations. Additionally, the town agrees to set up a small museum dedicated to the manor's history and the investigation, allowing visitors to learn about its dark past and the efforts to uncover the truth. As Emily leaves the town hall, she feels a sense of accomplishment and closure. The manor's haunting has been unveiled, and its history will now be preserved and appreciated. The experience has changed her perspective on the supernatural and the importance of uncovering the truth behind the unknown. Emily's journey has come to an end, but the legacy of the manor will continue to resonate. The whispers in the walls may have been silenced, but the story of the haunted manor will remain a powerful reminder of the mysteries that lie just beyond our understanding. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. Nestled in the heart of an overgrown countryside, where the fog clings to the earth like a shroud of secrets, stands a station that time forgot. This is not just any station. This is the last train station to nowhere, a place whispered about in hushed tones and written off as a mere relic of a bygone era. But beneath the peeling paint and rusted tracks lies a mystery that has lingered longer than the dust accumulating on the old ticket booths. Alice Moore, a young journalist with an insatiable curiosity for the forgotten and the eerie, drives down a winding, desolate road toward this forsaken station. Her car's headlights cut through the dense fog, illuminating the decrepit sign that reads, "Welcome to the last train station." The words are barely legible, worn by years of neglect. As she steps out, the chilling air envelopes her, carrying with it the faint echo of a long-lost past. Alice has heard the rumors, tales of passengers who board the midnight train only to vanish without a trace, leaving behind nothing but a chilling mystery. Her mission is clear: to uncover the truth behind the station's dark legend. She approaches the entrance, a grand archway now twisted and sagging under the weight of years and weather, and pushes open the creaking doors. Inside, the station is a snapshot of a forgotten era. The waiting room is adorned with faded posters and moth-eaten chairs that seem to whisper of the many departures they have witnessed. The air is thick with dust and silence, occasionally broken by the distant hoot of an owl. Alice's flashlight beam dances across the walls, revealing a large, antique clock frozen at midnight, a time that seems to hold a special significance in this forsaken place. Alice is greeted by the station's keeper, an elderly man whose presence is as enigmatic as the station itself. His eyes, sharp and knowing, seem to hold the weight of countless untold stories. With a voice that trembles from age and perhaps a deeper, unspoken fear, he says, "The last train to nowhere departs at midnight. It doesn't carry passengers. It carries memories. His cryptic warning sends a shiver down Alice's spine, but her resolve remains unshaken. She thanks him and begins her exploration, taking careful note of every detail. The station's old ticket booths, now dusty and covered in cobwebs, stand as silent witnesses to the many farewells that once took place. The large waiting room, filled with once comfortable chairs now sagging with age, seems to hold an oppressive silence, as though the walls themselves are waiting for something or someone to return. The further Alice ventures into the station, the more she uncovers about its past. The historical records she finds are sparse, but tell of a time when the station was bustling with activity. Passengers from all walks of life would have converged here, their lives briefly intersecting before the train whisked them away to their destinations. But there are gaps in the records, unexplained disappearances that hint at something more sinister. A particularly disturbing find is an old ledger detailing the station's schedules and passengers. The last entry is marked with an unsettling note: midnight, the last train. Alice's heart races as she reads the entry. It's the same train she's heard so much about, the one that supposedly carries memories instead of people. The ledger's pages are filled with names of those who boarded the train, but none of them were ever seen again. As the night deepens, Alice can't shake the feeling that she's being watched. The station's once dull atmosphere now seems charged with a palpable energy, an undercurrent of dread that makes her skin crawl. The clock's hands remain frozen at midnight, and the flickering lights cast long shadows across the platform, making every creak and groan of the old building seem like a whisper from the past. Alice's curiosity leads her to an old newspaper archive tucked away in a dusty corner of the station. The headlines are filled with reports of strange occurrences and unexplained disappearances linked to the station. Stories of a midnight train that never seems to leave the station, and passengers who are never seen again, paint a chilling picture of the station's dark legacy. In the dim light, Alice's eyes catch a glimpse of a large, dusty painting hanging on the wall. It depicts a grand train, steam billowing from its engine, its passengers all smiles and well-dressed. Yet, there's something unsettling about the painting. The faces of the passengers are blurred, as though intentionally obscured. It's as if the artist knew that these faces should never be clearly seen. The deeper Alice delves into her investigation, the more the sense of unease grows. The station seems to breathe with a life of its own, each creak of the wooden floorboards and whisper of the wind adding to the building's sinister atmosphere. The old keeper's words echo in her mind. The last train to nowhere departs at midnight. It doesn't carry passengers. It carries memories. As the clock approaches midnight, the anticipation in the station is almost unbearable. Alice prepares herself for whatever might come next, her flashlight casting long, jittery shadows across the empty platform. The stage is set, and the only thing left is to wait and see if the fabled last train will make its appearance. The station, with its secrets and shadows, holds its breath along with Alice. Tonight, the past is poised to collide with the present, and the mystery of the last train station to nowhere is about to unravel in ways Alice can scarcely imagine. As the final hours of the night tick away, the station transforms into a place where time seems to lose its meaning. The once familiar environment now feels foreign, laden with an almost tangible tension that makes every shadow and sound seem sinister. Alice's flashlight cuts through the thickening fog, illuminating the cracked tiles and peeling paint of the station's interior. The old ledger she discovered earlier continues to gnaw at her curiosity. She examines it closely, tracing her fingers over the faded ink and the unsettling note about the last train. The ledger is a cryptic puzzle, and Alice is determined to solve it. She sifts through the pages, noting the names and dates, searching for any clue that might reveal what happened to the passengers who boarded the midnight train. The clock on the wall ticks slowly toward midnight, its rhythmic sound growing louder in the oppressive silence. As the hour draws near, the station is engulfed in an eerie stillness. The wind outside picks up, and the occasional gust seems to carry with it faint, ghostly whispers. Alice can't quite make out the words, but the tone is unmistakably urgent, almost pleading. The whispers grow louder, more distinct. They seem to be coming from all around her, carried by the breeze that slips through the gaps in the station's old windows. It's as if the station itself is alive, echoing with the voices of those who once waited here. Alice's heart races as she tries to pinpoint the source of the murmurs. They appear to be coming from the direction of the tracks, now shrouded in an almost impenetrable fog. Alice decides to investigate the tracks, where the whispers seem to converge. The rails, once bright and polished, are now dull and covered in a thick layer of grime. The fog swirls around her ankles, making each step feel as though she's wading through an ethereal sea. She holds her flashlight high, its beam cutting through the mist, but the light seems to struggle against the fog's dense embrace. As she approaches the edge of the platform, Alice notices a small, weathered sign half buried in the dirt. It reads, "No entry, dangerous." The sign is barely legible, its letters obscured by years of exposure. Ignoring the warning, Alice presses on, driven by an insatiable curiosity and the growing sense that the answers she seeks are close at hand. The whispers reach a crescendo as Alice reaches the tracks. She can almost hear words forming, though they are distorted and fragmented. The whispers seem to be coming from beneath the tracks, from the depths of the station's forgotten underbelly. Alice kneels beside the tracks, straining to hear the voices more clearly. Suddenly, a sharp, metallic clang echoes through the station. Alice jumps, her flashlight flickering as she scans the darkness for the source of the sound. The noise seems to have come from the old maintenance shed, an outbuilding that Alice had previously overlooked. The shed's door hangs ajar, creaking gently in the wind. With a mix of trepidation and determination, Alice makes her way to the shed. Inside, she finds a jumble of old tools and equipment, covered in dust and cobwebs. In the corner, she spots an old, rusted box with a padlock. The whispers have grown louder, more insistent, and Alice feels a strong compulsion to open the box. She finds a crowbar among the debris and uses it to pry open the rusty padlock. The box creaks open, revealing a collection of old letters and photographs. The items are yellowed with age, and the smell of mildew permeates the air. Alice's hands tremble as she sifts through the contents, hoping to find something that will shed light on the mystery. The photographs are particularly haunting. They depict people in various stages of life, their faces filled with joy and sadness. Many of the images are of people who appear to be boarding the train, their smiles frozen in time. But what is most disturbing is the series of letters, each written in a frantic scrawl, detailing experiences of fear and disorientation. One letter in particular catches Alice's eye. It is signed by a passenger who claims to have witnessed the train arriving and departing without ever seeing a soul on board. The writer describes a sense of being watched, of a presence that seemed to loom just out of sight. The letter ends with a desperate plea for help, suggesting that the writer knew something terrible was about to happen. The final entries in the letter are a jumble of words, as though the writer was being overtaken by some unseen force. The last few lines are almost illegible, but they hint at a horrifying truth. The train, it carries memories of those who never returned. Alice's mind races as she processes the letter's contents. The realization that the train might be more than just a vehicle for physical transport. It could be a vessel for something far more sinister, sends chills down her spine. The whispers grow louder, as if in response to her newfound understanding. The clock on the wall chimes, marking the arrival of midnight. Alice's heart pounds as she glances at the platform. The station is now suffused with a spectral light, and the fog seems to coalesce into a dense, swirling mass. The temperature drops, and the whispers turn into a chorus of ghostly murmurs. Alice's flashlight flickers one last time before dying, plunging her into darkness. The fog envelopes the platform, making it nearly impossible to see. She can barely make out the outline of the tracks, and the whispers seem to be closing in on her from all directions. In the pitch-black darkness, Alice feels a cold hand brush against her shoulder. She spins around, but there is no one there. The whispers become a deafening roar, and the feeling of being watched intensifies. It's as though the very essence of the station is alive and aware of her presence. Alice takes a deep breath and steels herself. She knows that the next phase of her investigation will be even more perilous. The station, with its ghostly whispers and eerie atmosphere, is a place where the past and present collide in terrifying ways. The last train to nowhere is about to make its appearance, and Alice is determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As the hands of the clock inch closer to midnight, Alice stands on the edge of the platform, her breath visible in the frigid air. The station, now shrouded in an almost tangible fog, seems to hold its breath along with her. The distant echoes of the station's past blend with the current silence, creating a chilling symphony of anticipation and dread. Alice's flashlight, now a feeble beam in the dense fog, struggles to illuminate the surroundings. The eerie quiet is occasionally broken by the distant hoot of an owl or the rustling of leaves carried by the wind. The feeling of unease deepens with every passing second. The once familiar station has transformed into a place where reality seems to blur with the supernatural. The old ledger and photographs she discovered earlier weigh heavily on her mind. The train, a ghostly enigma, is said to arrive without warning at midnight. The station's keeper's words, "The last train to nowhere departs at midnight." It doesn't carry passengers. It carries memories, echo in her thoughts, adding to the mounting tension. As the clock strikes midnight, the station's old lights flicker and die, plunging the platform into darkness. The silence is abruptly shattered by a low, rumbling sound that seems to come from deep within the earth. The ground vibrates beneath Alice's feet, and a chill runs down her spine. The unmistakable sound of a train approaching grows louder, its rhythmic clatter reverberating through the fog. Alice's heart pounds in her chest as she peers into the thickening mist. The ground shakes with the increasing intensity of the rumble, and she can see the ghostly outline of a train emerging from the fog. It is unlike any train she has ever seen. Its design is old-fashioned, with ornate details that suggest it belongs to another era. The train's surface is a mix of dark steel and tarnished brass, glinting ominously in the limited light. The train comes to a slow, deliberate halt at the platform. Its arrival is both mesmerizing and terrifying. The windows are dark and opaque, making it impossible to see inside. The very presence of the train seems to absorb the light around it, casting an otherworldly glow on the platform. The whispers from earlier have intensified, filling the air with a cacophony of ghostly voices that seem to emanate from the train itself. Alice takes a deep breath and gathers her courage. She steps closer to the train, her footsteps echoing against the cold, hard platform. The train's exterior is covered in grime, and the once pristine brass fittings are tarnished with age. The doors of the train are slightly ajar, inviting Alice to step inside. She hesitates for a moment, but her determination to uncover the truth propels her forward. As she boards the train, Alice is enveloped by a sense of cold and decay. The interior of the train is a stark contrast to its exterior, luxurious yet decrepit. The plush seats are covered in dust, and the ornate decorations are tarnished and cobweb-covered. The atmosphere is heavy with a sense of abandonment, as though the train has been waiting for something, or someone, to come aboard. Alice walks down the dimly lit corridor, her footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust. The air is thick with the musty scent of mildew and neglect. Each compartment she passes is eerily empty, save for a few scattered items that seem to have been left behind in haste. The sense of unease grows stronger as she ventures deeper into the train. In one compartment, Alice finds a collection of old suitcases and personal belongings. The items are worn and faded, and she can't help but feel that they belong to the passengers who vanished. She opens one of the suitcases and finds a collection of letters and photographs, similar to those she discovered earlier. The contents are deeply unsettling, revealing glimpses into the lives of people who were once aboard the train. The photographs show passengers in various stages of life, happy moments captured in black and white. But there is a recurring theme in the images. The faces of the people are obscured or blurred, as though intentionally erased. The letters are filled with frantic scribbles and haunting messages, describing experiences of fear and disorientation. One letter in particular catches Alice's eye. It is addressed to a loved one and describes a surreal journey on the train. The writer speaks of a feeling of being trapped in time, of seeing familiar faces but not being able to recognize them. The letter ends with a desperate plea for help and a chilling statement. The train is not just a journey, it's a destination we can't escape. Alice's heart races as she reads the letter. The realization that the train might be more than just a mode of transport, that it could be a conduit for something far more sinister, sends a shiver down her spine. The train, with its ghostly aura and empty compartments, seems to embody the very essence of fear and mystery. The train begins to move, its engine emitting a low, mournful whistle. Alice's surroundings blur as the train picks up speed, and she feels a growing sense of disorientation. The landscape outside remains unchanged, a static, unyielding backdrop to the train's eerie journey. The sense of being trapped intensifies, and Alice's fear escalates as she realizes that the train is not just moving through space, it is moving through time. The compartments around Alice begin to distort, and the atmosphere becomes increasingly surreal. The once familiar train has transformed into a nightmarish realm where reality and illusion intertwine. Alice struggles to maintain her composure as the train speeds forward, its destination unknown and its purpose shrouded in darkness. The whispers from earlier have become a deafening roar, and the temperature inside the train drops significantly. Alice feels a cold presence, as if the train itself is alive and aware of her presence. The once grand compartments are now filled with shadowy figures and ghostly apparitions, their mournful eyes fixed on her as she tries to make sense of the chaotic journey. In the midst of the turmoil, Alice catches a glimpse of a familiar face, a face she has seen in the photographs and letters. The apparition is hauntingly similar to the people she has encountered in her investigation. The figure reaches out to her, its expression a mixture of sadness and desperation. The train's speed increases, and the surroundings become a blur of darkness and light. Alice's fear reaches its peak as she struggles to stay grounded amidst the chaos. The train's journey seems endless, a relentless march through an otherworldly realm where time and space have lost their meaning. As the train slows to a halt, Alice finds herself back at the station. The fog has lifted slightly, and the first light of dawn begins to break through the mist. The train vanishes as abruptly as it appeared, leaving behind only the haunting echoes of its last passengers. Alice is left standing on the platform, forever changed by the eerie journey she has just endured. As the first light of dawn filters through the lingering fog, Alice stands alone on the now empty platform of the last train station to nowhere. The surreal journey she has just endured on the ghostly train leaves her with a profound sense of disorientation and dread. The station, once a place of eerie calm, now seems to pulse with a sinister energy, as if it, too, is relieved that the ghostly train has departed. Alice's mind races with the revelations she has encountered. The train's journey through a nightmarish realm, the ghostly apparitions, and the cryptic messages left behind have shaken her to her core. The answers she sought have led to more questions, each more unsettling than the last. The train was not merely a relic of the past, but a vessel for the restless spirits trapped between worlds. The sun's early rays cast long shadows across the platform as Alice returns to the station's interior, determined to piece together the remaining fragments of the mystery. The dusty corridors and abandoned waiting rooms now seem even more oppressive, their silence heavy with the weight of untold stories. Alice re-examines the photographs and letters she found in the train's compartment. Each item tells a fragment of a larger, more disturbing narrative. The blurred faces in the photographs, the frantic scribbles in the letters, all point to a single, haunting truth. The train is a conduit for memories of those who vanished without a trace. It is not merely a means of transportation, but a gateway to a dimension where the past and present collide in disturbing ways. Her thoughts are interrupted by a sudden, inexplicable chill. The temperature in the station plummets, and the whispers she heard on the train return, more intense and desperate than before. The spectral voices seem to be coming from the old maintenance shed, the place where she discovered the letters and photographs. Determined to uncover the source of the eerie voices, Alice heads back to the shed. The door creaks open with a groan, and the interior is even colder than before. The once familiar surroundings now seem otherworldly, as if the shed has become a portal to another realm. The ghostly voices grow louder, converging on a single point in the middle of the room. Alice approaches the center of the shed, where she finds an old, dusty mirror propped against the wall. The mirror's surface is covered in a thick layer of grime, but Alice can make out faint, shimmering reflections. As she wipes the dust away, the mirror reveals a scene from the past, a spectral tableau of people waiting at the station, their expressions filled with anticipation and sorrow. The mirror acts as a window into the past, showing glimpses of the passengers who once boarded the last train. Alice watches in horror as the scene unfolds before her eyes. The passengers are not merely waiting. They are trapped in a loop of their final moments. The reflection shows them boarding the train, only to find themselves back at the station, their faces filled with a mixture of confusion and resignation. As Alice gazes into the mirror, she realizes that the train's passengers are not lost to time, but are trapped in a never-ending cycle of departure and return. The mirror's reflection reveals the true nature of the last train. It is not just a vessel for memories, but a prison for souls condemned to relive their final moments eternally. The revelation is both chilling and heartbreaking. The passengers, once full of life and hope, are now doomed to an endless journey with no escape. The station, with its ghostly whispers and eerie ambience, is the epicenter of this haunting loop. The train's arrival and departure are mere formalities in a cycle that perpetuates the torment of the trapped souls. Alice's hands tremble as she steps back from the mirror. The weight of the truth is almost unbearable, and the oppressive atmosphere of the station seems to close in on her. The whispers have become a cacophony of anguished voices, pleading for release from their eternal prison. In the midst of the turmoil, Alice hears a voice, clear and distinct amidst the ghostly clamor. It is the same voice she heard on the train, filled with desperation and sadness. The voice speaks directly to her, urging her to break the cycle and release the souls trapped in the mirror's reflection. With newfound resolve, Alice examines the mirror closely. She notices an inscription etched into the frame, almost hidden beneath the grime. The inscription reads, "To free the lost, one must understand the past." Determined to free the trapped souls, Alice begins to investigate the mirror's connection to the station's history. She searches for clues that might reveal how the cycle of torment began and how it can be broken. The answer lies in the history of the station and the stories of those who once passed through its doors. As Alice delves into the station's past, she uncovers a series of tragic events that led to the creation of the haunting cycle. The station was once a vibrant hub of activity, but a series of disasters and disappearances cast a dark shadow over its legacy. The last train, once a symbol of hope and progress, became a vehicle for the souls of those lost in the turmoil. The key to breaking the cycle lies in acknowledging the pain and suffering of the past. Alice must confront the ghosts of the station's history and find a way to release them from their eternal prison. The mirror, with its spectral reflections, is both a gateway and a prison, a symbol of the unresolved anguish that binds the souls to the station. With a heavy heart and a determined spirit, Alice prepares to face the final challenge. She knows that breaking the cycle will not be easy, and the station's eerie atmosphere seems to foretell the trials ahead. But she is driven by the desire to bring peace to the restless souls and end the cycle of torment that has plagued the last train station to nowhere for so long. The dawn's light begins to break through the fog, casting a pale, ghostly glow over the station. Alice takes a deep breath and steels herself for the final confrontation. The journey is far from over, and the truth of the last train awaits her as she prepares to unravel the final threads of the haunting mystery. As the first light of dawn creeps into the eerie confines of the last train station to nowhere, Alice stands poised at the precipice of the station's haunting legacy. The fog that once cloaked the station in an otherworldly shroud is beginning to lift, revealing the stark reality of the place. The revelations of the past few hours weigh heavily on her shoulders, and she is determined to put an end to the cycle of torment that has ensnared the souls of the last train's passengers. The mirror, with its ghostly reflections, has revealed the tragic truth. The station and the train are not mere relics of the past, but living embodiments of a cursed cycle. The souls trapped within the mirror are doomed to relive their final moments, their anguish echoing through the station's corridors and compartments. Alice's heart pounds as she takes a deep breath, gathering her resolve. She knows that breaking the cycle will require not just courage, but a deep understanding of the station's dark history. The whispers that have filled the air are now quieter, as if the station itself is holding its breath in anticipation of what is to come. To break the cycle, Alice must confront the source of the torment and offer a final act of closure. She gathers the photographs and letters she has found, each one a piece of the puzzle that has haunted the station. These fragments of the past must be acknowledged and honored to set the trapped souls free. With a sense of solemnity, Alice arranges the photographs and letters in a circle around the mirror. The items are symbols of the lives and stories of those who once passed through the station, their presence now woven into the fabric of its haunting mystery. She lights a candle and places it in the center of the circle, its flame flickering softly in the stillness. As the candle's light dances, Alice begins to speak aloud, addressing the souls trapped within the mirror. Her voice is steady but filled with compassion. She recounts the stories of those who were lost, acknowledging their pain and suffering. Her words are a tribute to their lives and a plea for their release. "I understand now," Alice says, her voice echoing through the silent station. The last train to nowhere is not just a place of departure, but a symbol of the unresolved anguish of those who never reach their destination. Your stories matter. Your pain has not been forgotten. As she speaks, the mirror's surface begins to shimmer and ripple. The ghostly reflections of the passengers become clearer, their faces showing a mix of relief and sorrow. The whispers that once filled the air are now replaced by a profound silence, as if the station itself is listening. The candle's flame grows brighter, casting a warm, soothing glow over the mirror and the photographs. The oppressive atmosphere of the station begins to lift, and the temperature rises to a more comfortable level. The fog outside continues to dissipate, revealing the station in its true form, a place of history and memory, no longer a prison for lost souls. Alice continues her heartfelt tribute, recounting the final moments of the passengers and expressing her hope for their peace. The mirror's surface gradually clears, and the ghostly figures begin to fade, their anguished expressions replaced by looks of gratitude and acceptance. The last passenger's reflection slowly disappears, leaving behind a calm and serene mirror. The haunting presence that once filled the station has vanished, replaced by a sense of quiet relief. The cycle of torment has been broken, and the souls of the last train's passengers are finally free. With a deep sense of accomplishment, Alice steps away from the mirror. The station, now bathed in the gentle light of dawn, feels transformed. The oppressive atmosphere has lifted, and the once ghostly whispers are replaced by the soothing sounds of a new day. Alice knows that her journey has come to an end, and the station's dark legacy has been laid to rest. As Alice makes her way to the exit, she casts one last look around the station. The peaceful silence that now prevails stands in stark contrast to the eerie clamor of the past. The last train station to nowhere, once a place of eternal torment, is now a symbol of closure and redemption. The journey of the last train has come to a peaceful end, and the story of the station finds its final resolution. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. The evening sky was painted in shades of violet and gold as the last rays of sunlight filtered through the overgrown trees. The old mansion at the edge of town stood as a silent witness to time's passage, its once grand facade now a tattered remnant of its former glory. For years, it had been a topic of hushed whispers and morbid curiosity among the locals, a place where dark stories lingered like the dust on its rotting window panes. Samantha, a passionate historian with a knack for uncovering hidden truths, had always been intrigued by the mansion's secrets. Armed with her camera, a flashlight, and an insatiable curiosity, she approached the mansion with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The mansion had recently been put up for auction, and she saw this as her chance to delve into its mysteries before it was renovated or, worse, demolished. As Samantha unlocked the creaking door and stepped inside, she was greeted by a rush of stale, musty air. The grand entrance hall, though cluttered with broken furniture and cobwebs, retained a certain faded elegance. The staircase, once ornate and majestic, now loomed like a skeletal reminder of past grandeur. Samantha's footsteps echoed as she ventured further into the house, each room revealing its own tale of neglect and decay. The attic was her primary destination. According to local legend, it was the location where the most bizarre events had occurred, a place where the past seemed to cling with an almost tangible presence. Samantha climbed the narrow, winding staircase, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Each step seemed to bring her closer to uncovering the mansion's most guarded secret. Upon reaching the attic, Samantha was greeted by a scene of chaos. Old trunks, broken mirrors, and furniture draped in sheets. But amidst this clutter, her eyes were drawn to an old, dust-covered object tucked away in the corner. It was a dollhouse, small, intricately designed, and covered in a layer of grime that hinted at years of abandonment. The dollhouse was not just any toy. It was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, with detailed rooms and miniature furniture that seemed to capture a bygone era. Samantha carefully brushed away the dust, revealing the dollhouse's faded yet delicate beauty. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with every piece of furniture painstakingly crafted and placed with meticulous care. However, the more she inspected it, the more a chill ran down her spine. The dolls inside, dressed in vintage clothing, were posed in unnatural ways. They seemed to watch her with lifelike eyes, their blank stares unsettling. Samantha's unease grew as she noticed something odd. One of the dolls, a small girl in a white dress, was placed in a different position from the others. It seemed as if it was deliberately positioned to face the entrance of the dollhouse, its eyes glinting in the dim light. The discrepancy felt deliberate, as if the doll was somehow aware of her presence. Determined to document her find, Samantha set up her camera and began taking detailed photographs of the dollhouse from every angle. She meticulously recorded each room and its furnishings, trying to capture the essence of the eerie scene before her. As she reviewed the photos, she noticed a subtle yet disturbing detail. In several images, the doll appeared to have shifted its position slightly, though she was certain it had not moved while she was photographing it. Unease transformed into a sense of urgency as Samantha realized that the dollhouse seemed to be more than just an old toy. It felt alive, its silence heavy with unspoken secrets. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, she decided to investigate the history of the mansion and the dollhouse. If there was any truth to the story she had heard, she would need to uncover it to understand the full scope of what she was dealing with. Back in her makeshift research lab, a small, cluttered room in her apartment, Samantha began her deep dive into the mansion's history. Her research revealed a series of unsettling facts about the property. The mansion had been built in the early 1900s by the Hawthorne family, a wealthy and influential family whose members had mysteriously disappeared under strange circumstances. Rumors swirled about the family's involvement in occult practices and supernatural events, but concrete evidence was scarce. The dollhouse, as it turned out, was a key piece of this puzzle. It was believed to have belonged to Emily Hawthorne, the youngest daughter of the family. Local legend had it that Emily was particularly attached to the dollhouse and that it played a central role in the family's final, tragic days. According to the few surviving accounts, Emily had become increasingly withdrawn and disturbed, claiming that the dolls in the house moved on their own and whispered to her at night. Samantha's research also uncovered a chilling detail, a series of diary entries from Emily's mother, which described the growing fear and paranoia within the Hawthorne family. The entries spoke of dark forces and unsettling occurrences centered around the dollhouse, culminating in the family's abrupt disappearance. As Samantha prepared to return to the mansion to further investigate, she could not shake the feeling that she was on the brink of uncovering something far more sinister than she had initially anticipated. The dollhouse, with its lifelike dolls and eerie presence, seemed to be a conduit to the mansion's dark past, a past that was waiting to be unearthed. The stage was set for Samantha's next visit. Armed with new knowledge and a deeper sense of purpose, she was determined to uncover the truth behind the dollhouse and the mysterious events that had transpired within the mansion's walls. The story of the Hawthorne family and their haunted dollhouse was far from over. It was only just beginning. The moon hung low and full in the night sky, casting a silvery glow over the abandoned mansion. Samantha arrived at the property with a renewed sense of purpose, her research from the previous days only deepening her curiosity. The mansion, now shrouded in darkness, seemed almost to exhale its own haunted history as she approached. Armed with a flashlight, a voice recorder, and a notebook, Samantha felt the weight of the mansion's past bearing down on her. The flickering beam of her flashlight cut through the oppressive darkness as she retraced her steps to the attic. Each creak of the old floorboards beneath her felt like a whisper from another time, a subtle reminder that she was not alone in the shadows. Once inside the attic, Samantha set up her equipment around the dollhouse. The object of her investigation stood eerily silent in the corner, its presence both fascinating and unsettling. She carefully positioned the voice recorder to capture any possible electronic voice phenomena, EVPs, hoping to gather evidence of the supernatural. Samantha began her investigation by methodically inspecting the dollhouse's rooms once more. The detailed miniature furniture and the lifelike dolls were as disquieting as ever, their glassy eyes seemingly following her every move. The dolls' positions were still peculiar, with the girl in the white dress maintaining her unsettling gaze towards the entrance. She took out her notebook and began to jot down observations. The intricate details of the dollhouse mirrored the mansion itself, with each room reflecting the grandiosity and decay of the house's current state. The furniture, though miniature, was a replica of what once might have adorned the mansion, elegant and yet forlorn. As Samantha examined the dollhouse's rooms, she noticed something she hadn't before: faint, almost imperceptible scratch marks on the floorboards of the miniature bedrooms. They were too small and delicate to have been made by anything other than tiny, human-like fingers. The realization sent a shiver down her spine. Determined to uncover more, Samantha turned her attention to the diary she had found. Emily's handwritten entries provided fragmented clues about the dollhouse and the Hawthorne family's unsettling experiences. The diary had described Emily's growing fear of the dollhouse's dolls, but the specifics of what she experienced were vague and disjointed. One entry caught Samantha's eye. "The dolls are watching. They know what happened. I can hear them whispering my name. They want me to join them." The entry was dated just days before Emily's family disappeared. Driven by a sense of urgency, Samantha decided to consult local archives for more information. She hoped that further research might reveal additional details about the Hawthorne family's disappearance and the dollhouse's origins. The town's historical society, located in a modest brick building downtown, became her next destination. The historical society was a treasure trove of local records and personal accounts. Samantha spent hours poring over old newspapers, letters, and photographs. She found various articles about the Hawthorne family, but one, in particular, stood out. It described the family's abrupt departure and the rumors surrounding their involvement in occult practices. The article mentioned a series of peculiar incidents that had plagued the family leading up to their disappearance. Neighbors reported seeing strange lights and hearing unsettling noises coming from the mansion. There were also accounts of eerie sightings, including glimpses of shadowy figures in the windows and strange movements in the garden. Samantha's findings suggested that the Hawthorne family had been deeply involved in practices that sought to bridge the gap between the living and the spirit world. It appeared that their attempts had gone terribly wrong, resulting in the malevolent force that now seemed to be linked to the dollhouse. Returning to the mansion, Samantha felt a sense of mounting tension. The dollhouse, with its meticulously crafted rooms and unsettling dolls, now felt like a focal point for the mansion's dark energy. She needed to understand more about the rituals the Hawthorne family had performed and the nature of the entity that had taken hold of their lives. With renewed determination, Samantha set up her recording equipment around the dollhouse, hoping to capture any supernatural activity. She began a session of EVP recording, asking questions about the Hawthorne family, the dollhouse, and the entity that might still be lurking in the shadows. The silence that followed was thick and heavy, almost palpable. Samantha felt as though she was holding her breath, waiting for any sign of response. As the minutes ticked by, her sense of unease grew. The atmosphere in the attic felt charged with an intangible presence, and the air seemed to hum with latent energy. Just as Samantha was about to conclude her recording session, she heard a faint, chilling whisper. It was so soft that she almost missed it, but it was unmistakable. The voice was eerie and distant, barely audible, but it clearly said, "Help us." Startled, Samantha rewound the recording and listened again. The whisper was faint, but unmistakable. It was clear that whatever was haunting the mansion and the dollhouse was still very much present, and it was reaching out for assistance. The revelation left Samantha with more questions than answers. Who was asking for help? What was the nature of the entity or entities that still lingered in the mansion? The whispered plea only deepened the mystery and fueled her determination to uncover the truth. As the night wore on, Samantha decided to spend more time in the attic, continuing her investigation and monitoring the dollhouse for any further signs of supernatural activity. The silence of the mansion seemed to close in around her, and the dollhouse's dark history became ever more compelling. Each creak of the house and every faint sound seemed to be a part of the larger puzzle she was determined to solve. The dollhouse, with its eerie silence and unsettling presence, was a key to understanding the haunting that had plagued the Hawthorne family and the mansion. Samantha knew that the answers she sought were hidden within its intricacies, and that the secrets of the past were waiting to be uncovered. As dawn approached, Samantha felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The mystery of the abandoned dollhouse had only begun to unravel, and the journey ahead promised to be as dark and unsettling as the mansion itself. The whispers of the past were growing louder, and Samantha was determined to listen. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the grimy attic windows, Samantha reluctantly packed up her equipment. The whispered plea from the night before echoed in her mind, a chilling reminder of the mysteries that still awaited her. Exhausted but resolute, she knew that the dollhouse was central to the mansion's dark past. Her next step was to uncover the true nature of the entity connected to it and the extent of its influence. Samantha's next course of action was to delve into the history of the occult practices that had taken place in the mansion. The whispers and sightings reported by the neighbors hinted at a deep-seated malevolence that might have been awakened or harnessed by the Hawthorne family's experiments. She needed to understand the rituals that had been performed and their potential consequences. Back at her research lab, Samantha immersed herself in occult literature and historical accounts of supernatural practices. She found references to various rituals intended to summon or communicate with spirits, many of which involved creating a physical conduit, a vessel through which the spirit could interact with the living world. The dollhouse, with its meticulous detail and lifelike dolls, seemed to fit this description perfectly. She came across a description of a particularly unsettling ritual involving a spirit doll, a vessel created to house a spirit or entity. The ritual required the doll to be consecrated through a series of ceremonies, and it was said that the spirit could exert influence over the physical world through the doll. The descriptions matched the eerie nature of the dollhouse and its dolls. Samantha's research also revealed that such rituals often had unintended consequences. If the spirit or entity was malevolent, or if the ritual was performed improperly, it could lead to the entity gaining control over the vessel and subsequently over those who came into contact with it. This might explain the unsettling events that had plagued the Hawthorne family and the mansion. Armed with this knowledge, Samantha prepared for her next visit to the mansion. She decided to bring additional equipment to aid in her investigation, including a thermal camera, electromagnetic field, EMF, meter, and a set of occult symbols for protection. Her goal was to document any supernatural activity in more detail and to attempt a ritual of her own to communicate with the entity. The mansion welcomed her with its familiar silence as she returned to the attic. The dollhouse, still in its corner, seemed almost to pulse with an unseen energy. Samantha set up her equipment and began to conduct a series of tests. The thermal camera revealed cold spots around the dollhouse, areas where the temperature dropped significantly compared to the rest of the attic. The EMF meter detected fluctuations in electromagnetic fields near the dollhouse, suggesting the presence of a strong energy source. Determined to learn more, Samantha set up a small ritual space around the dollhouse. She arranged the occult symbols in a protective circle and placed candles at the cardinal points. Her intention was to create a safe space for communication and to avoid any potential negative influence from the entity. As she began the ritual, She recited prayers and invocations to protect herself and to ask for clarity and guidance. The atmosphere in the attic grew dense and charged, the flickering candlelight casting strange shadows on the walls. The whisper she had heard before began to surface again, this time more distinct and coherent. The EVP recordings from this session captured more than just faint whispers. They revealed a series of fragmented phrases and cries for help. The voice was anguished, and the desperation was palpable. It was clear that the entity trapped in the dollhouse was not at peace. Samantha's heart raced as she listened to the recordings. The cries seemed to be coming from different voices, some pleading for release, while others seemed to curse or express anger. The voices were disjointed but conveyed a common theme of suffering and entrapment. The most startling revelation came when Samantha reviewed the footage from the thermal camera. In one of the frames, a distinct, shadowy figure appeared near the dollhouse. It was not a mere trick of the light or an artifact of the camera. It was a clear, humanoid shape with dark, shifting edges. The figure seemed to be moving, its presence menacing and dark. Determined to understand more, Samantha decided to confront the entity directly. She used her voice recorder to ask specific questions about the nature of the haunting and the entity's origins. The questions were simple, aimed at gathering information about the spirit's identity and its connection to the dollhouse. The response was immediate. The recorder captured a voice, clear and unambiguous, saying, "We are trapped." The words were followed by a series of unintelligible mumblings, as if multiple voices were trying to speak at once. Samantha's hands trembled as she realized the gravity of the situation. The entity, or entities, were not only trapped, but were also actively trying to communicate their plight. The dollhouse was a prison for these spirits, and their suffering was palpable. The realization that the spirits were seeking help forced Samantha to rethink her approach. She needed to find a way to release them from their confinement and break the hold that the dollhouse had over them. The first step would be to research potential methods for freeing trapped spirits and perform a cleansing ritual to break the connection between the dolls and the malevolent force. As she packed up her equipment and prepared to leave the mansion, Samantha felt a profound sense of responsibility. The haunted dollhouse was no longer just an object of curiosity. It was a vessel of suffering, and she was determined to find a way to bring peace to the trapped spirits. The night had been long and filled with unsettling discoveries, but Samantha's resolve was stronger than ever. The dollhouse's dark secret was beginning to reveal itself, and the journey to uncover the full extent of its haunting was just beginning. She knew that the answer she sought would require further investigation and courage, but she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The mansion's oppressive silence seemed to weigh heavily on her as she left, but Samantha's mind was abuzz with thoughts and plans. The dollhouse, with its dark history and malevolent presence, had become a focal point in her quest for understanding and resolution. She was committed to uncovering the truth and bringing light to the shadows that had long plagued the mansion. The day had dawned gray and oppressive, mirroring the heavy atmosphere that hung over Samantha as she prepared for her return to the mansion. The revelations from the previous night had left her unsettled, but more determined than ever to confront the entity and attempt to release the trapped spirits. The dollhouse was more than just a relic. It was a beacon for a malevolent force, and Samantha needed to act decisively. Her plan was to perform a cleansing ritual, combining elements from various sources she had studied to create a powerful, multifaceted approach. She hoped this would not only banish the entity, but also offer some form of peace to the trapped spirits. Equipped with holy water, protective symbols, and a carefully prepared ritual script, Samantha felt a mixture of trepidation and resolve as she drove to the mansion. Upon arriving, she noticed that the mansion appeared unchanged, its looming silhouette against the overcast sky an ever-present reminder of its eerie past. The air felt heavier than before, as if charged with anticipation. She entered the mansion with a renewed sense of purpose, making her way to the attic where the dollhouse awaited. The attic seemed colder and more foreboding than Samantha remembered. As she set up her ritual space, she felt a distinct shift in the atmosphere, an almost palpable sense of tension that seemed to rise with every flicker of her candles. She placed the dollhouse at the center of the ritual circle, the dolls within it seeming to watch her with their blank, glassy eyes. Samantha began the ritual by invoking protection from various spiritual sources. She sprinkled holy water around the dollhouse, the droplets catching the light and creating small rainbows that danced on the dust-covered floor. She recited prayers and incantations, each word deliberate and filled with intent. The ritual script she had prepared was a blend of traditional exorcism prayers and protective invocations, designed to confront and dispel malevolent entities. As the ritual progressed, the temperature in the attic dropped noticeably. Samantha could see her breath misting in the air, and the flickering candle flames began to dance erratically. The sense of unease grew, and the whispering voices from the EVP recording seemed to become louder, more insistent. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Samantha felt a powerful, cold gust of wind rush through the attic, extinguishing her candles and sending papers and objects flying. The dollhouse trembled as if caught in an unseen force. Samantha's heart pounded, but she held her ground, determined to see the ritual through. The dolls in the dollhouse began to move on their own, shifting positions and rearranging themselves in unsettling ways. The temperature continued to plummet, and the whispers grew into an unintelligible cacophony of voices. It was as if the entity was reacting violently to the ritual, its power trying to resist the intrusion. Samantha pressed on, her voice steady despite the chaos. She continued reciting the incantations, her words a shield against the malevolent force. As she spoke the final prayer, she felt a sudden, overwhelming pressure, an intense force that seemed to push back against her efforts. She could almost sense the entity's rage and desperation, its struggle against the cleansing ritual. In a final, dramatic moment, a loud, echoing bang reverberated through the attic. The dollhouse shook violently, and then, as suddenly as it had started, everything fell silent. The temperature in the room began to rise, and the oppressive weight seemed to lift. Samantha looked around, her heart racing as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. The dolls in the dollhouse were now still, their previous eerie movements stilled. The sense of malevolence had diminished, replaced by a fragile silence. Samantha carefully extinguished the remaining candles and dismantled the ritual space, her mind still reeling from the intensity of the confrontation. She took a moment to collect her thoughts and review the results of her investigation. The recordings and photographs she had taken during the ritual showed fluctuations in the electromagnetic field and drops in temperature, confirming the presence of a powerful entity. However, the most significant change was the shift in the atmosphere. The oppressive, dark energy that had once pervaded the attic seemed to have lifted, replaced by a calmer, more neutral presence. Samantha's relief was tempered by a lingering sense of uncertainty. Had she truly succeeded in freeing the trapped spirits, or had the entity merely retreated, waiting for another opportunity to manifest? The mansion's history and the dollhouse's dark secrets were still shrouded in mystery. As she prepared to leave the mansion, Samantha couldn't shake the feeling that this was not the end of the story. The dollhouse and the spirits it held had revealed only a fraction of their secrets. She resolved to continue her investigation, to uncover more about the Hawthorne family's fate, and to ensure that the entity's influence was fully eradicated. The mansion's silent, eerie grandeur seemed to offer no answers, only more questions. As Samantha drove away, she glanced back at the mansion one last time, its dark silhouette fading into the mist. The journey to uncover the truth was far from over, and the dollhouse's dark legacy was still very much alive in her mind. The sun rose slowly over the mansion, its first light casting a warm glow on the old, decaying structure. Samantha returned to the mansion for what she hoped would be the final investigation, determined to assess the effects of the previous night's ritual and to uncover any remaining mysteries surrounding the haunted dollhouse. The mansion felt different, less oppressive and quieter, though there was still an eerie stillness in the air. Samantha approached the attic with a mix of anticipation and apprehension, her previous experiences weighing heavily on her mind. As she ascended the stairs, she noted the subtle changes in the environment. The cold spots were gone, and the unsettling whispers had faded into silence. It was a promising sign, but Samantha knew better than to let her guard down. Inside the attic, the dollhouse stood in the center of the room, seemingly untouched by the chaos of the previous night. The dolls remained in their places, their glassy eyes as impassive as ever. Samantha carefully examined the dollhouse and the surrounding area, looking for any signs of residual energy or lingering malevolent presence. She began by reviewing the recordings and photographs taken during the ritual. The images of the dollhouse and the surrounding attic showed a stark contrast from before. There were no longer any shadowy figures or disturbing anomalies. The thermal camera footage indicated a return to normal temperatures, and the EMF readings were stable. It appeared that the ritual had indeed succeeded in dispelling the most aggressive manifestations of the entity. Samantha's next task was to investigate the diary she had found earlier. She hoped that any additional entries might provide further insight into the Hawthorne family's experiences and the nature of the entity that had plagued them. She carefully flipped through the pages, seeking any new clues that might emerge. One entry in particular caught her eye. It described a final confrontation with the spirit, written by Emily's own hand. The entry detailed a desperate attempt to banish the spirit from the dollhouse, a ritual that had gone awry and led to the family's disappearance. The diary hinted at a powerful curse placed on the dollhouse, one that bound the spirits to it and prevented their release. Samantha realized that the curse might have been what the entity was trying to protect, its malevolent force a desperate effort to maintain its hold over the spirits and the dollhouse. The ritual she had performed was likely the first step in breaking this curse, but there might be more work required to ensure the spirits were fully freed. Armed with this new understanding, Samantha prepared to perform a secondary ritual. This one would focus on breaking the curse and ensuring that the spirits could finally find peace. She gathered additional supplies and carefully set up the ritual space, once again using protective symbols and holy water, but this time with a specific focus on removing the curse. The ritual began in earnest, with Samantha reciting incantations and prayers designed to lift the curse and release the spirits from their confinement. The atmosphere in the attic remained calm, and the sense of foreboding that had previously hung heavy seemed to have dissipated. As she conducted the ritual, she felt a profound sense of connection to the spirit she was trying to help, a feeling that they were finally being acknowledged and released from their torment. After completing the ritual, Samantha took a moment to reflect on the journey she had undertaken. The mansion and the dollhouse, once symbols of fear and darkness, now seemed to hold a quieter, more serene presence. The oppressive weight that had once hung over them appeared to have lifted, and the sense of malevolence was gone. As she prepared to leave, Samantha felt a deep sense of closure. The mansion, with its dark history and haunted past, had been confronted and, to some extent, resolved. The dollhouse's mysteries had been explored, and the spirits trapped within it had been given a chance at release. Before departing, Samantha made a final round of the mansion, checking for any remaining signs of supernatural activity. The silence was reassuring, and the atmosphere felt lighter, as if the house itself was finally able to breathe freely. She left the mansion with a sense of accomplishment, knowing that her efforts had made a difference. Driving away from the mansion, Samantha reflected on the events that had transpired. The investigation had been challenging and emotionally taxing, but it had also been deeply rewarding. She had faced darkness head-on and had emerged with a sense of resolution and purpose. The haunted dollhouse was no longer a symbol of fear, but rather a testament to the resilience of those who sought to understand and confront the unknown. Samantha knew that while her journey with the mansion had come to an end, her quest for knowledge and understanding would continue. As the mansion receded into the distance, Samantha felt a sense of peace. The haunted house and its dollhouse had given up some of their secrets, and the spirits trapped within had been given a chance at freedom. The story of the dollhouse was one of both darkness and hope, a reminder that even in the most haunted of places, there could be light and resolution. The chapter closed with a sense of finality, but also with the understanding that the mysteries of the supernatural were vast and ever-present. Samantha's investigation had come to a satisfying conclusion, but the world of the unknown was always waiting for the next story to be uncovered. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. The old theater loomed on the edge of town like a shadow from a forgotten era. It had stood abandoned for decades, its once grand marquee now a rusted skeleton, its ornate facade obscured by layers of grime and neglect. Local legends spoke of a curse that had befallen the theater, a tale of betrayal and vengeance that had led to its ruin. The phantom of the theater was said to haunt its decaying halls, seeking retribution for a crime that had been committed long ago. Martha Jennings, a young and ambitious journalist, had always been fascinated by urban legends and haunted places. When she heard about the abandoned theater and its ghostly inhabitant, she saw it as the perfect subject for her next investigative piece. Armed with her camera, notepad, and an insatiable curiosity, Martha decided to explore the theater and uncover the truth behind the ghostly rumors. As Martha approached the theater, the air seemed to grow colder, a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The grand entrance, now shrouded in darkness, beckoned her with an eerie silence. The once vibrant posters that had adorned the lobby were now faded and tattered, hinting at the theater's former glory. With a deep breath and a sense of determination, Martha pushed open the creaky front doors and stepped inside. The interior of the theater was a realm frozen in time. Dust-covered seats, once plush and inviting, now lay in disarray. The stage, once the center of performances, was a darkened void, its grandeur lost to the ravages of decay. Martha's footsteps echoed through the empty space, her flashlight casting long, flickering shadows on the walls. Her initial observations were mundane: cracked plaster, scattered debris, and the faint smell of mildew. But as she ventured deeper into the theater, she began to sense something more unsettling. The atmosphere seemed thick with anticipation, as if the theater itself was waiting for something to happen. Martha's investigation led her to the theater's archives, a small room filled with dusty old files and faded photographs. She hoped to find clues about the theater's past, particularly about the alleged betrayal that had led to the haunting. Among the papers, she discovered a collection of playbills and news clippings from the theater's heyday, including one particularly intriguing article about a scandal involving the theater's star performer, Vincent Hale. Vincent Hale had been a celebrated actor in the early 1900s, known for his charismatic performances and charm. However, the article detailed a dramatic fall from grace, a betrayal by his closest friends and colleagues that had resulted in his disgrace and eventual downfall. According to the report, Vincent had accused his fellow actors of sabotaging his career, leading to a tragic end that left him bitter and vengeful. The article mentioned that Vincent's final performance had been marked by a mysterious accident that had claimed his life. The circumstances surrounding his death were shrouded in secrecy, and many believed that his spirit had never left the theater. Martha felt a shiver run down her spine as she realized that the ghostly rumors might have more substance than she had initially thought. As the night deepened, Martha decided to conduct a more thorough investigation. She set up her camera and voice recorder on the stage, hoping to capture any supernatural activity. The theater's silence was profound, punctuated only by the occasional creak of the building settling. With the equipment in place, Martha began to explore the backstage area, a labyrinth of dark corridors and forgotten props. The air was thick with dust, and every corner seemed to hold a secret. She felt an unsettling presence, as if unseen eyes were watching her every move. The sense of being observed grew stronger, and Martha's anxiety mounted. In the dim light of her flashlight, she noticed something peculiar: a large, ornate mirror covered in a thick layer of dust. The mirror was positioned at an odd angle, facing away from the stage. Martha wiped away the dust, revealing a reflection that seemed oddly distorted. The mirror's surface was cracked, and the reflections were fragmented, giving an unsettling impression of someone or something watching her from behind. Suddenly, a cold draft swept through the backstage area, extinguishing her flashlight and plunging her into darkness. Martha's heart raced as she fumbled to relight her flashlight, her breath visible in the cold air. The temperature had dropped sharply, and the oppressive silence was now punctuated by faint, echoing whispers. As she turned on her flashlight, Martha noticed something else: a trail of dark, hand-shaped smudges leading from the backstage area to the center of the stage. The smudges seemed to form a pattern, as if someone, or something, had left a message in its wake. Martha followed the trail, her flashlight casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. The trail led her to a hidden compartment beneath the stage, a small, dusty space that had clearly been forgotten over the years. Martha Pride opened the compartment and discovered a collection of old letters and photographs, all related to Vincent Hale and the theater's scandalous past. The letters revealed a web of deceit, betrayal, and personal vendettas that had plagued Vincent's life and career. One letter, in particular, stood out. It was addressed to Vincent and was filled with accusations and threats from one of his former colleagues. The letter's tone was bitter and vengeful, reflecting the deep animosity that had existed between Vincent and those who had conspired against him. Martha's hands shook as she read the letter, realizing that the ghostly rumors were not mere legend, but rooted in real, tragic events. The night wore on, and Martha continued her exploration of the theater. The whispers grew louder, and the sense of a malevolent presence became more intense. She felt a growing unease, as if the theater's spectral inhabitant was becoming more agitated by her presence. The haunting atmosphere and the disturbing discoveries made her question what she had gotten herself into. Martha's investigation was far from over. She knew that uncovering the truth behind the Phantom's revenge would require more than just historical research. She needed to delve into the spiritual realm and confront the restless spirit that had been wronged. The abandoned theater, with its secrets and shadows, had become a focal point for her quest for answers. As she prepared to leave for the night, Martha glanced back at the stage, where the ghostly whispers seemed to linger. The theater was silent once more, but the echoes of its dark past continued to resonate in her mind. She knew that the story of Vincent Hale and the haunting betrayal was only beginning to unfold, and she was determined to see it through. With her camera, notes, and a sense of foreboding, Martha left the theater, the chilling silence of the abandoned building a stark contrast to the bustling world outside. The tale of the Phantom's revenge was a puzzle she was determined to solve, and the theater's dark history had only deepened her resolve. The journey ahead promised to be fraught with danger and discovery, but Martha was ready to face whatever lay in the shadows. The following week was filled with mounting tension for Martha as she delved deeper into the history of the theater and its enigmatic star, Vincent Hale. The theater's dark past seemed to have become an inescapable shadow in her life, and she found herself obsessively researching every detail she could find about Vincent and his betrayal. Martha spent hours poring over old newspapers, letters, and historical records, piecing together a timeline of Vincent Hale's rise and fall. She learned about his remarkable talent, his charisma on stage, and the growing resentment from those who felt overshadowed by his success. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became that Vincent's downfall had been orchestrated by a group of people who had once been his closest friends and allies. As she continued her research, Martha began to feel a deep sense of unease. The stories she uncovered were tragic and unsettling, but it was the personal nature of the betrayal that struck her the most. Vincent Hale had been betrayed not only in his professional life, but also in his personal relationships. The letters she had found in the theater indicated that the betrayal had been orchestrated with a ruthless and cold-hearted precision. Determined to understand more about the Phantom's presence and what might have triggered its return, Martha decided to revisit the theater. Her goal was to conduct a more thorough investigation and attempt to communicate directly with the spirit of Vincent Hale. Armed with new equipment, an EVP, electronic voice phenomena, recorder, a thermal camera, and a spirit box, Martha hoped to gather more evidence of the haunting. As night fell, Martha arrived at the theater, its imposing silhouette outlined against the darkening sky. The atmosphere felt thick with anticipation, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She took a deep breath and entered the theater, the old doors creaking ominously as she pushed them open. Inside, the theater was as she had left it, with the same oppressive silence hanging in the air. Martha set up her equipment on the stage, positioning the cameras to cover various angles and setting up the spirit box in the center. She also laid out a collection of the old letters and photographs she had found, hoping that the presence of these artifacts might prompt a response from Vincent's spirit. With everything in place, Martha began her investigation. She started by speaking into the spirit box, asking questions, and trying to establish a connection with the ghost. The spirit box crackled and hissed, emitting random bursts of static and fragmented words. Martha's heart raced as she listened intently for any signs of a response. "Is there anyone here with me tonight?" Martha asked, her voice steady despite her growing anxiety. "Can you tell me your name?" The spirit box emitted a series of garbled sounds before a clear, chilling voice emerged from the static. "Vincent," it whispered, the name sending a shiver down Martha's spine. She was elated and unnerved by the direct response, but she pressed on with her questioning. "Vincent Hale, I am here to understand what happened to you," Martha continued. "Why are you still here? What do you want?" The response from the spirit box was more fragmented, with phrases like betrayed, revenge, and justice cutting through the static. Martha could sense the intensity of the spirit's emotions, the anger and sorrow that had lingered for decades. She felt a profound connection to the spirit, a sense that Vincent was trying to communicate something important. As the night wore on, Martha reviewed the footage from her cameras and listened to the EVP recordings. The thermal camera revealed cold spots in various locations around the theater, and the EVP recordings captured faint but distinct whispers that seemed to corroborate the responses from the spirit box. The evidence was compelling, but it was clear that the Phantom's story was far from complete. Martha decided to explore the backstage area once more, hoping to uncover any additional clues. As she moved through the dark corridors, she felt an increasing sense of dread. The temperature dropped sharply, and the air seemed to grow heavier with each step. The whispers she had heard earlier now seemed louder, echoing through the empty halls. In the dim light of her flashlight, Martha stumbled upon an old dressing room that had been sealed off with a heavy curtain. She had not noticed it before, but something about the room's isolation piqued her curiosity. She pulled back the curtain and entered the room, her flashlight revealing a dusty and neglected space. On a small table in the corner, Martha found a collection of old costumes and theatrical props. Among them was a worn-out notebook, its cover embossed with intricate designs. She opened the notebook and found it filled with handwritten notes and sketches. The notes appeared to be Vincent Hale's personal journal, chronicling his thoughts and experiences during the tumultuous period of his life. The journal provided a detailed account of Vincent's growing frustration and paranoia. He wrote about his suspicions of being sabotaged and the betrayals he had suffered from those he once trusted. The final entries were particularly haunting, describing a sense of impending doom and a growing obsession with revenge. Martha felt a chill as she read the last entry, which was scrawled in a shaky hand. "I will not rest until justice is served. My spirit will haunt this place until the truth is revealed." The discovery of the journal was a breakthrough. It provided valuable insight into Vincent's state of mind and his reasons for remaining bound to the theater. Martha realized that the spirit's quest for vengeance was deeply rooted in the betrayal he had suffered and the injustice he felt. As Martha prepared to leave the theater, she felt a mix of satisfaction and unease. The evidence she had gathered was significant, but she knew that there was more to uncover. The Phantom's revenge was a tale of haunting betrayal, and the truth was still out there, waiting to be revealed. The abandoned theater stood silent once more, its dark history and restless spirit a constant reminder of the past. Martha knew that her investigation was far from over. The story of Vincent Hale and his quest for justice was just beginning, and she was determined to see it through to the end. As she drove away from the theater, Martha's mind raced with the implications of her findings. The tale of the Phantom's revenge had taken on a new dimension, and she was more resolved than ever to uncover the full story. The journey ahead would be challenging and fraught with danger, but Martha was prepared to face whatever lay in the shadows. The abandoned theater, with its haunted past and spectral presence, remained a symbol of unfinished business. Martha's quest for the truth was only beginning, and the echoes of Vincent Hale's revenge would continue to haunt her as she pursued the story to its final resolution. Martha Jennings returned to her small apartment, her mind buzzing with the revelations from the abandoned theater. The journal she had discovered revealed a tortured soul, seeking justice from beyond the grave. Determined to uncover more about Vincent Hale's tragic story and the betrayal that led to his haunting, Martha knew she needed to dig deeper into the lives of those who had wronged him. Her first step was to track down any living relatives or descendants of Vincent Hale's colleagues, those who might shed light on the personal vendettas that had marked his downfall. She reached out to historical societies, local archives, and even social media to find any leads. It wasn't long before she located a surviving family member of one of Vincent's former collaborators, a retired actor named Arthur Bennett. Arthur Bennett was an elderly man living in a quiet suburban neighborhood. He had once been a prominent actor in his own right, but his career had waned in the decades following Vincent Hale's scandal. Martha arranged a meeting with him, hoping he might provide insights into the betrayals and the atmosphere of the theater during Vincent's final days. The meeting was set for a sunny afternoon at Arthur's modest home. Martha arrived with a mix of hope and trepidation. Arthur greeted her warmly, though there was a cautious glint in his eyes. They settled into his living room, surrounded by old photographs and memorabilia from his acting career. Martha began by explaining her investigation and the findings she had made in the theater. Arthur listened intently, his expression growing more somber as she spoke. When she mentioned Vincent Hale's name, a shadow crossed Arthur's face, and he seemed to hesitate before responding. Vincent Hale was a remarkable talent, Arthur said finally, his voice tinged with regret. But he was also a man who made enemies easily. His success bred jealousy, and his personal flaws didn't help matters. The scandal that ruined him was not just about professional rivalry. It was deeply personal. Arthur's eyes wandered to a photograph of himself with Vincent Hale from their earlier days. He seemed lost in thought, and Martha sensed that there was more he was not telling her. Vincent was a difficult man, Arthur continued. He had a temper and could be quite demanding. But the betrayal he faced, well, that was more than just professional sabotage. It involved personal vendettas, broken friendships, and a lot of anger. Martha pressed further, asking Arthur about the specific individuals involved and the nature of the betrayal. Arthur was reluctant to name names, but mentioned a few key figures who had been influential in the theater scene at the time. He spoke of a tight-knit circle of actors and directors who had conspired against Vincent, but he didn't provide many details. "I don't want to speak ill of the dead," Arthur said, his voice faltering. But there were accusations of deceit and sabotage. Vincent's fall from grace was orchestrated by those he trusted most. It was a terrible time, and many of us were caught in the crossfire. Arthur's reluctance to provide concrete details was frustrating, but Martha knew she had to find other sources to piece together the full story. She thanked Arthur for his time and left his home with a list of names and leads to follow. Back at her apartment, Martha reviewed her notes and began researching the individuals mentioned by Arthur. She discovered that many of them had continued their careers in the theater, but their lives had since faded into obscurity. She managed to locate a few surviving acquaintances who might still hold memories of the scandal. One such person was Edith Carter, a former theater critic who had written extensively about Vincent Hale's career and the scandal that had ended it. Martha reached out to Edith, who agreed to meet and discuss her experiences. The meeting took place in a quaint cafe, where Edith, now in her late 70s, greeted Martha with a warm smile. She was eager to share her insights and seemed to have a lot to say about the theater's turbulent past. "I remember Vincent Hale vividly," Edith began, her eyes bright with recollection. "He was a brilliant actor, but his downfall was both dramatic and tragic. The betrayal was a culmination of many factors: professional jealousy, personal vendettas, and a series of unfortunate events." Edith revealed that the betrayal had been orchestrated by a faction of theater insiders who felt threatened by Vincent's rising star. The group had spread rumors and manipulated circumstances to discredit him, leading to his eventual downfall. The culmination of this betrayal had been a staged accident that had resulted in Vincent's death. "The accident was no mere coincidence," Edith explained. "It was carefully planned to look like a tragic mishap, but it was meant to be the final blow to Vincent's career and life. Those responsible felt they were protecting their own interests, but they underestimated Vincent's resolve." Martha listened intently as Edith recounted the events, taking notes and recording the conversation. The details painted a vivid picture of the treacherous world of theater politics and the personal animosities that had fueled Vincent's tragedy. As the meeting concluded, Edith provided Martha with a collection of articles and correspondence from the time, which shed further light on the scandal and the individuals involved. Martha left the cafe feeling a mix of satisfaction and unease. The pieces of Vincent Hale's story were falling into place, but the more she uncovered, the darker the tale became. Returning to her apartment, Martha reviewed the new evidence. The articles described the scandal in detail, highlighting the personal betrayals and the manipulation that had led to Vincent's downfall. It became clear that Vincent's spirit was not just seeking revenge, but was also trying to reveal the truth about the injustices he had suffered. Determined to bring the story to light, Martha prepared for another visit to the abandoned theater. She needed to confront the spirit directly and seek answers to the lingering questions about the betrayal and Vincent's quest for justice. As she gathered her equipment and notes, Martha felt a growing sense of urgency. The haunted theater, with its shadowy past and restless spirit, was calling her back. The next phase of her investigation promised to be intense and revealing, and she was ready to face whatever awaited her in the shadows of betrayal. The chill of the abandoned theater seemed to have taken on a new intensity as Martha Jennings approached it once again. The night was particularly still, and the theater's dark silhouette loomed menacingly against the starless sky. Martha's recent discoveries had only heightened her sense of foreboding, and she was acutely aware that she was about to delve deeper into the heart of the haunting mystery. With her camera, EVP recorder, spirit box, and the new evidence from Edith Carter, Martha entered the theater. The familiar creak of the old doors seemed to resonate with an almost sentient awareness of her presence. Inside, the theater was as she remembered, an eerie emptiness punctuated only by the distant echoes of her footsteps. The atmosphere felt charged, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Martha set up her equipment once more on the stage, carefully arranging the old letters and photographs she had gathered. The stage, with its dust-covered floor and tattered curtains, seemed to hold a palpable sense of anticipation. As she began her investigation, Martha felt an uneasy tension in the air, a presence that seemed to grow stronger as she conducted her session. She started with the spirit box, asking direct questions to Vincent Hale's phantom. "Vincent Hale, I am here to seek the truth about what happened to you," Martha said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Can you tell me more about the betrayal and the accident?" The spirit box crackled and hissed before a voice emerged from the static, fragmented but unmistakable. "Betrayal, accident, revenge," it whispered, each word carrying a weight of sadness and anger. Martha took a deep breath, feeling a shiver as the temperature in the theater seemed to drop further. She continued to question the spirit, hoping to draw out more details about the individuals involved and the events leading up to Vincent's death. "Who betrayed you, Vincent? Who was responsible for the accident?" Martha pressed, her voice echoing through the empty theater. The spirit box responded with a series of garbled sounds, but one name stood out clearly amidst the static: Edgar. Martha's heart skipped a beat. Edgar was one of the names mentioned by Arthur Bennett and Edith Carter, a key figure in the conspiracy against Vincent. She needed to understand more about this person and his role in the betrayal. As Martha reviewed the footage from her cameras, she noticed a series of strange anomalies: flickering lights, unexplained shadows, and sudden cold spots. The evidence seemed to corroborate the paranormal activity she was experiencing. She knew that Vincent's spirit was trying to communicate something important. Determined to confront the phantom directly, Martha decided to visit the hidden compartment beneath the stage where she had previously discovered the old journal. The space felt even more oppressive and cold than before, and the whispers seemed to grow louder as she approached. Martha carefully examined the area, focusing on the items she had previously found. The old journal, with its haunting entries about betrayal and revenge, seemed to resonate with the spirit's presence. She took a deep breath and spoke into the darkness, her voice carrying a mixture of resolve and empathy. "Vincent, I know you're here. I want to understand what happened and help reveal the truth. Please, if you can, show me what I need to know." The temperature in the compartment dropped sharply, and Martha's breath became visible in the cold air. The whispers grew louder, forming words that were difficult to decipher but conveyed a sense of urgency. Suddenly, Martha felt a presence behind her, a cold, lingering sensation that made her skin crawl. She turned slowly, her flashlight casting long shadows across the room. The air felt thick and heavy, as if the walls themselves were closing in on her. A soft, mournful wail echoed through the compartment, and Martha saw a faint, translucent figure materialize before her. The ghostly apparition of Vincent Hale stood in front of her, his face etched with sorrow and anger. Martha's heart raced, but she remained composed, determined to communicate with the spirit. "Vincent, I am here to listen," Martha said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. "Please tell me what happened. How did they betray you?" The spirit's voice was barely a whisper, but the anguish in its tone was palpable. "They wanted my downfall. Jealousy, deceit. The accident was their final act of betrayal." Vincent's apparition seemed to struggle with the weight of his emotions, and Martha could sense the deep pain and anger that had kept his spirit bound to the theater. She felt a surge of sympathy for the tormented soul, realizing that the betrayal had been both personal and professional. "Who were they, Vincent? Who was behind the betrayal and the accident?" Martha asked urgently, hoping to gain clarity. The spirit's form flickered, and a vision flashed before Martha's eyes, a scene of turmoil and confrontation. She saw a group of men, their faces shadowed and indistinct, plotting and scheming against Vincent. The vision revealed a climactic moment where Vincent was betrayed, leading to a fatal accident that was orchestrated to look like a tragic mishap. The vision faded, and Vincent's apparition seemed to grow fainter. Martha felt a profound sense of loss as she realized that the spirit's anguish was far from over. She needed to ensure that Vincent's story was told, and that the truth about the betrayal was brought to light. "Thank you, Vincent," Martha said softly. "I will do everything I can to uncover the truth and make sure your story is heard." The apparition of Vincent Hale seemed to nod in acknowledgement, and the cold, oppressive atmosphere began to lift. Martha felt a sense of relief, knowing that she had made a connection with the spirit and gained valuable insights into the betrayal. As she packed up her equipment and prepared to leave the theater, Martha felt a renewed sense of purpose. The investigation was far from over, but she was determined to follow through with her quest for justice. The abandoned theater, with its haunted past and spectral presence, had revealed more of its secrets, and Martha was ready to face whatever lay ahead. With a final glance at the shadowy stage, Martha left the theater, her mind filled with the echoes of Vincent Hale's tragic story. The journey to uncover the full truth about the Phantom's revenge was only beginning, and she was prepared to confront the darkness and unravel the mystery of betrayal that had haunted the theater for so long. Martha Jennings had gathered substantial evidence and uncovered much about Vincent Hale's haunting betrayal, but the final piece of the puzzle eluded her. The Phantom's apparition had provided critical insights into the conspiracy that led to his tragic end, but Vincent's spirit was not yet at peace. Martha knew that to lay the ghost to rest, she needed to expose the full truth about the betrayal and ensure justice for Vincent Hale. With her newfound understanding of the events that transpired, Martha set out to confront the key figures involved in the conspiracy. One name stood out prominently: Edgar Thornton. As one of the central figures in the betrayal, Edgar was crucial to unraveling the complete story. Martha learned that Edgar had lived a reclusive life after the scandal, moving far from the city where he had once been a prominent theater figure. Edgar now resided in a small, secluded cottage on the outskirts of town. Martha arrived at his home, feeling a mixture of determination and trepidation. The cottage was surrounded by dense woods, adding an air of isolation to the setting. Martha approached the front door, her heart pounding with anticipation. Edgar answered the door, a frail and weary man who appeared much older than his years. His eyes were sharp and guarded, but there was a flicker of recognition as he looked at Martha. She introduced herself and explained her investigation into Vincent Hale's tragic story. Edgar's demeanor was initially defensive, but as Martha spoke about the evidence she had gathered and the spirit's revelations, he seemed to relax slightly. He invited her in, and they sat in his modest living room, the walls adorned with old theater memorabilia. "I've heard rumors that someone was digging into the past," Edgar said, his voice tinged with resignation. "I suppose it was only a matter of time before someone connected the dots." Martha took a deep breath and confronted Edgar with the details she had uncovered. She explained how Vincent Hale's career had been sabotaged and how the fatal accident that had ended his life was a carefully orchestrated act of betrayal. Edgar listened in silence, his face a mask of unreadable emotions. "Why did you do it, Edgar?" Martha asked, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "Why did you and the others conspire against Vincent?" Edgar's expression softened, and he let out a weary sigh. Vincent Hale was a brilliant actor, but he was also a threat to those of us who had built our careers around him. His success made us feel insignificant, and the jealousy and fear were consuming. He continued, his voice laden with regret. The accident wasn't meant to be lethal at first. It was supposed to discredit him, to make him seem unreliable and unfit for the stage. But things went wrong, and the accident ended up killing him. Martha felt a pang of sorrow for the ghostly figure she had encountered. Vincent Hale's life had been cut short by the very people who should have been his allies. Edgar's confession, though painful, was a crucial step in bringing the truth to light. "I didn't want things to end this way," Edgar said, his voice trembling. "The guilt has haunted me for years. I've been trying to make amends in my own way, but I know it's not enough. I can't undo the past, but I wish I could." Martha could see the weight of guilt on Edgar's face, and she realized that the truth was not just about uncovering past wrongs, but also about understanding the human consequences of those actions. She thanked Edgar for his honesty and left his cottage, feeling a profound sense of closure and empathy. Returning to the abandoned theater, Martha prepared to conduct one final investigation. The evidence she had gathered from Edgar's confession and the spirit's revelations needed to be documented and presented. She set up her equipment and began recording her findings, explaining the full story of Vincent Hale's betrayal and the conspiracy that had led to his tragic end. As Martha spoke into the camera, she felt a deep sense of purpose. The theater, with its dark history and restless spirit, had been the backdrop for a tale of profound betrayal and haunting revenge. By revealing the truth, Martha hoped to bring some semblance of peace to Vincent Hale's tormented soul. "I have uncovered the story of Vincent Hale's betrayal," Martha said, her voice steady and clear. "The conspiracy that led to his tragic end has been revealed, and the truth is now out in the open. Vincent's spirit sought justice, and through this investigation, we have brought that justice a step closer." As she concluded her recording, Martha felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. The abandoned theater seemed to exhale a sigh of relief, the oppressive atmosphere lifting slightly as if acknowledging the truth that had been uncovered. The echoes of Vincent Hale's story would now be known, and his quest for justice had been addressed. Martha left the theater one final time, feeling a mix of satisfaction and solemnity. The journey to uncover the truth had been challenging and emotionally draining, but it had also been profoundly rewarding. Vincent Hale's story, marked by betrayal and haunting revenge, had been brought to light, and his spirit could finally rest. As Martha drove away from the theater, she glanced back at the old building, now bathed in the soft light of dawn. The past had been laid bare, and the truth had been revealed. The tale of Vincent Hale's tragic fate would be remembered, and his legacy would live on through the story that had been told. The theater, once a place of darkness and sorrow, stood as a testament to the enduring quest for justice and the power of uncovering the truth. Martha Jennings had faced the shadows of betrayal and emerged with a story that would resonate for years to come. The Phantom's revenge had been addressed, and the haunting legacy of Vincent Hale's life and death had been brought to its rightful resolution. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents.